Victor was pleased to see that Lucien hadn't lost momentum in his studies over the past few days. Within 50 minutes, Lucien had absorbed the remaining grammar rules with ease. He was sharp, naturally gifted with languages, and possessed an impressive memory. Feeling inspired by the good mood in the room, Victor began humming to himself. "Ladies and gentlemen, let's take a short break. Help yourselves to some tea and snacks. I need to jot something down," he announced, already making his way upstairs before finishing his sentence. Lucien picked up a delicate white teacup and took a sip of the peculiar-tasting tea. Rubbing his eyes, he tried to relax for a moment. "When can we go hunting at your family's manor again, Felicia?" Annie asked with a wistful sigh. "I miss the deer and rabbits, and the fresh air." Annie was another noble lady among them, though her status was less distinguished. Despite her striking blonde hair and gem-like green eyes, her beauty was considered average. Her father, merely one of many sons of a common baron, had inherited nothing. No title, no land, no manor. Their family maintained the illusion of nobility through her father's modest income as a court clerk and the annuity from their noble title. By contrast, the Hayne family, one of the most prominent in the Duchy of Orveret, still held considerable influence. Although Felicia's father had not inherited the title, he had retained a vast manor outside Alto, complete with its own woods, orchards, and even a granite quarry. They also owned a prestigious property within the city. Among them, Felicia had the most esteemed family background. On hot summer days, nothing was better than escaping the city's sweltering heat to enjoy hunting and homemade wine at a countryside estate. Young nobles without access to such luxuries naturally longed for an invitation. Lucien could tell Annie was eager to ingratiate herself with Felicia. "Is that true, Lady Felicia? Are there really rabbits and deer at your manors?" Renee chimed in with curiosity. Since their lessons had begun, Renee had worked hard to endear herself to the noble students by discussing music, a tactic that proved effective. Encouraged by her success, she increasingly joined their conversations, even picking up bits of musical theory along the way. She frequently asked Felicia and Annie about related topics, gradually becoming more familiar with them. Following her lead, Colin and David began doing the same. Lucien, however, remained focused solely on his studies. Reserved and bookish, he never sought out conversations, nor did either the nobles or commoners make an effort to engage him. "I miss the manor as well," Felicia admitted, sitting with her usual poise. A polished smile graced her lips. "But with only 3 months left until Mr. Victor's performance, Lot, Herodotus, and I have to dedicate ourselves to practice. I simply don't have time to visit." Naturally, Felicia enjoyed being flattered and envied. Who wouldn't? Lucien wouldn't have minded seeing such a grand estate himself, but his priority remained clear: securing the dictionary and finishing his studies as quickly as possible. Victor returned downstairs, a satisfied smile on his face. The idle chatter died down immediately. At that moment, Athy, the steward, entered and whispered in Victor's ear, "Your guest has arrived, my lord." "Oh, I completely forgot," Victor exclaimed, shaking his right hand in mild frustration. "Let him in, please." Turning to his students, he offered a polite apology. "I'm terribly sorry, ladies and gentlemen. I had forgotten about my guest today. Shall we resume class tomorrow afternoon at 2? My sincerest apologies." The students were more than happy to end the lesson early. As they prepared to leave, Lucien approached Victor, ready to request the Common Tongue Dictionary for a few days. Before he could speak, 2 guests entered the room, following Athy. One was a striking silver-haired man clad in a red shirt and black coat. The other was an elderly gentleman with white hair, carrying a wooden suitcase. Mr. Rhine, Lucien, and Felicia recognized the guests simultaneously. Felicia's cheeks flushed, while Lucien was taken aback. He had assumed Rhine was merely a wandering bard living in a tavern. Yet here he was, a guest of Victor's. The revelation was unexpected. "Ah, Felicia! And you're here too, Lucien?" Rhine greeted them with his usual charm. Felicia smiled shyly, but a flicker of surprise crossed her face. "How did Mr. Rhine know Lucien?" "You know Mr. Rhine?" Victor asked, intrigued. "Yes, we've met before," Lucian replied, nodding. I didn't expect to see him here at your home. Ryan's smile was as captivating as ever, almost ethereal. Yes, we met once before, and Lucian left quite an impression on me. Back then, he was determined to learn how to read. And look at him now. I always admire young people who strive for their dreams. Even Lucian felt slightly embarrassed by the praise. Mr. Ryan is the concertmaster I'm currently working with, Victor explained, his admiration evident. He has an exceptional and unique understanding of music. Without his insights, I doubt I would have found inspiration for my piano concerto. What? Lucian barely managed to keep his jaw from dropping. Just a few days ago, he had met Ryan at the Copper Cornet in the slums. And now he was the concertmaster? From his classmates' discussions, Lucian had learned that the structure of an orchestra here resembled that of Earth's symphonies. The first violinist or concertmaster was second only to the conductor. How had Ryan, seemingly an outsider, secured such a crucial role? Ryan must have noticed Lucian's bewilderment. He chuckled lightly and explained, the previous concertmaster fell madly in love with a noble lady and eloped with her to Syracuse a few days ago. Mr. Victor had no choice but to recruit me. He shrugged with a grin. Mr. Ryan should have been the first violinist even if the previous master had stayed. Felicia interjected, her cheeks still tinged with pink. He just needs time to practice with the others. I completely agree, Victor added. Ryan is one of the finest violinists I've ever met. I'm incredibly fortunate to have him. An honor to meet you, Mr. Chevelle, Victor said warmly, shaking his hand. He immediately led the craftsman upstairs, too eager to continue the conversation to notice his students lingering. Uncertain of Lucian's relationship with Ryan, Athy refrained from ushering him out. The other students, including Felicia, Annie, Colin, and a few others, also followed upstairs, their curiosity piqued. Lucian had no intention of leaving without the dictionary, so he followed as well, eventually arriving at Victor's practice room. Mr. Chevelle, I want the harpsichord to be more responsive to pressure, allowing greater control over volume, Victor explained. My composition demands a wider tonal range, more resonance, power, yet also delicacy and clarity. Chevelle examined the instrument closely, his brows slightly furrowed. I'm afraid that's impossible, Mr. Victor. The harpsichord has undergone more than 3 centuries of refinements. It has reached its limits. Even minor improvements would be difficult. A heavy silence filled the room. Then Lucian suddenly spoke. What if we transform it into a percussion instrument? Instead of plucking, what if we strike the strings? He had an idea that could change everything. Victor was deeply troubled. Without an improved harpsichord, the demanding nobles, musicians, and critics would be unimpressed with his performance. Worse still, he risked a scathing review from Wolfe in music criticism, which would ruin any chance of ever performing in the Psalm Hall again. He had witnessed many talented musicians falter in the hall, their careers crumbling under the weight of failure. Every few years, at least one despairing artist succumbed to their disappointment, some even taking their own lives. The world of music could be an unforgiving place, particularly for those with sensitive souls. While he appreciated Lucian's attempt to help, Victor found himself irritated by what he saw as reckless speculation. Suppressing his annoyance, he responded in a measured tone. Thank you, Lucian, but it's more complicated than simply combining the two. How arrogant a slum-dweller daring to interrupt. The noble students were livid. Lot, Herodotus, and Felicia shot Lucian looks of disdain. Meanwhile, Ryan stood to the side, his lips curling into an almost imperceptible smile, as if anticipating Lucian's response. Although Lucian had yet to fully grasp the contents of his books, he had formulated a rough idea. Observing the inner workings of the harpsichord before him, he hesitated only briefly before speaking. With the help of a certain mechanism, the motion of the fingers could be amplified, increasing the force of the internal hammers, and thus producing a louder sound. He deliberately spoke in layman's terms, carefully avoiding technical words like amplitude to maintain his facade as an uneducated slum dweller. Amplified? How? Chevelle's stern gaze did not waver, his white eyebrows knitting together. He had heard similar proposals before, but every attempt had ended in failure. Under their scrutiny, Lucien grabbed a flute from the wall. I once saw a farmer lift a heavy rock using a wooden stick and a smaller rock. Like this, he set an ink bottle beneath the flute and demonstrated the principle of leverage. I see. Rather than dismissing the idea outright, Chevelle mulled over it carefully. However, he soon pointed out a flaw. But this would slow the striking speed. Impressive, Lucien. You're demonstrating the lever principle. Ryan studied the model closely before stepping toward Lucien. Lucien feigned confusion, but was, in truth, startled. How did Ryan know about the lever principle? And why was it called the same thing here? The others, however, appeared baffled. You've all likely encountered this in daily life, Ryan continued. I first heard about it while traveling in home. Scholars there discovered this principle centuries ago. But in a place like Alto, where divine power and bloodline blessings are revered, scientific knowledge spreads much more slowly. Turning to Lucien, Ryan asked, have you noticed that the longer the lever, the easier it is to lift an object? Lucien, of course, knew this well, but maintained his act. Really? Then, could multiple levers be used together? He stopped himself from saying more. Mentioning multi-lever transmission would be too revealing. Ryan's eyes gleamed. Connection. Multi-levers. He immediately moved to Chevelle's side, speaking in hushed tones while sketching on a piece of paper. Lucien watched intently, his suspicions growing. Ryan, he's no mere bard. I'm sure of it. Ryan animatedly gestured, explaining the principle. Before long, Victor joined the discussion, his excitement mounting. Lucien, how exactly did you connect them? I've seen this before, but never thought of applying it here, Lot unexpectedly asked. Felicia shot him a glare. Be quiet. Go downstairs if you want to chat. Lot, unwilling to miss the conversation, nodded and fell silent. The other students simmered with irritation. Lucien, this nobody who had only recently arrived, was suddenly the center of attention. They silently wished his idea would fail. Understanding there were still key differences between a harpsichord and a modern piano, Lucien immersed himself in his books again, searching for anything else that might help. A resonant melody filled the room, powerful at first, then soft and delicate in the final notes. Amazing! Victor's face lit up with exhilaration. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Mr. Chevelle. While there was still work to be done, the breakthrough they needed had been made. It was my pleasure. Ryan offered a charming smile. Victor embraced both men in gratitude before turning to Lucien, arms open. Lucien, thank you. You set us on the right path. I thank the heavens for bringing you to me. Caught off guard by the sudden hug, Lucien stiffened. It was nothing, Mr. Victor. I didn't think I'd actually be of any help. Victor laughed, clapping him on the back. From now on, if you ever need anything, just ask. The other students exchanged envious glances. How had this newcomer so quickly earned Victor's favor? Lucien, too, was thrilled. This could be his chance. Well, yes, Mr. Victor, he said hesitantly. I do need something. Victor smiled encouragingly. Name it. Lucien rubbed his hands nervously. Could I borrow your common tongue dictionary? Ryan let out an amused chuckle, and the others, including Lot and Felicia, couldn't help but smirk. Of course, my dear boy, Victor said without hesitation. Anything else? Lucien hesitated. He already felt like he was asking too much. Noticing his reluctance, Victor urged him on. Go on. Don't be shy. Mr. Victor, could I study here for free? Ryan burst into laughter.
Hey, welcome to Firescale Audiobooks. If you enjoy our audiobooks, please consider subscribing to the channel. Also, feel free to share your review in the comments section below.
Victor also started laughing. He was almost laughing to tears. Even a serious elderly man like Chevelle was smiling and shaking his head, not to mention Lot, Felicia, and Herodotus. The rest of the students who hadn't had a chance to be Mr. Victor's music students laughed as well, albeit bitterly to some extent. Lucien felt a bit awkward. Mr. Victor? He asked carefully. Victor stopped himself after several coughs, looking at Lucien seriously. Lucien, would you like to study music under me? I know it's hard to start from scratch at your age, but a smart and hard-working young lad like you could still be a qualified musician in the future. Also, completely for free, Victor added humorously. Victor had 3 types of students: The ones learning how to read, which paid 5 nars every month. The ones selected among the previous type, who would learn music from him for the price of 10 nars a month. And only a really gifted and outstanding student could perform with him and benefit from his fame and network. Victor, for now, had just one student like that, who was already a well-known musician. So, what Victor offered meant that Lucien could save 10 nars every month. On the other hand, that much was still not a lot for the musician, even now when he was kind of struggling because of his current income. Victor would only earn about 7 gold thalers a year for teaching these students, which of course did not mean much to him. When Victor was performing for the nobles, his income was around 100 gold thalers annually. Actually, merely 7 thalers a year was already pretty good for most of the commoners. Annie's father, a court clerk, earned no more than 15 thalers a year. Although the other students envied Lucien, he was a bit hesitant about the offer. He never thought he would learn music. Different thoughts were flashing through his mind. The witch's note, John's family, and his own plan. I'm afraid I'll have to live in Alto for a longer time, until I find a better place to learn magic. After all, Alto's the biggest and busiest city in the West. Being a respectable musician can be a pretty good cover for me. Soon Lucien made up his mind, and his face lit up with a smile. Of course. That would be great honor, thank you, Mr. Victor. Really? Victor was nodding with satisfaction. You're both smart and diligent, and also have a simple heart. I'm sure you'll achieve something if you keep working like this. I'm not that simple, Lucien thought to himself. At the same time, he felt slightly uncomfortable with the way the other students were looking at him. Having his dictionary and the returned 5 nars with him, Lucien left the house and was ready to go back home. Good job, Lucien. The girl with brown hair and green eyes caught up with Lucien from behind. I'm Renee. Renee Wise. I just want to say that your talent really impressed me. Being eager to read the rest of the witch's note, Lucien was not in a chatting mood now. Hi, Renee. I'm running late for an appointment. I'm sorry, but can we talk next time? Oh, all right. Her expression froze for a second, but soon the smile came back. At this time, Annie and another noble student, Maxie, passed by them, and Annie's mouth twisted in a contemptuous sneer. Keeping her elegant paces, Annie directly walked away without having a glimpse of Renee. From a distance, Colin and David sneered at Renee as well, but they also wished they could be as lucky as Lucien. The early summer sunshine still shone over Audiobook at around 5 in the afternoon when Lucien arrived at his house. He couldn't wait to read the rest of the notes. The good news could wait until tomorrow to be shared with Elisa and her family. Devouring the brown bread, Lucien locked the wooden door from the inside. After taking out his quill and paper, he was ready to start his exploration again. Then he entered into his spirit library to copy the dictionary. Finishing the work, Lucien opened the witch's book again. By 10 o'clock that night, Lucien had finished all of his reading. With a long sigh, he stretched slowly. It looked like the witch was not very good at reading ancient Sylvanas texts as well, because she took the notes in great detail. Some of the parts came directly from her ancestors. Lucien was pretty confident that he could just follow her notes to learn magic. The only problem was that the notes explained no further than how to become a primary level sorcerer. After that point, Lucien would have to find other ways to advance. Or maybe he could learn some ancient Sylvanas characters from the note and learn the contents from the book Astrology and Magic Elements. Anyway, now Lucien was ready to start learning magic. According to the notes, people in ancient magic empires believed that magic worked as the result of 4 basic elements: earth, fire, wind, water, releasing power under the guidance of their spirit. Later, light, darkness, and necromancy magic joined in. And sorcerers were also able to summon demons from hell, pits, or other dimensions. At the same time, all the magic could be divided into 8 schools: element, astrology, necromancy, illusion, summoning, force, transformation, and alchemy. The book Astrology and Magic Elements was mainly focused on element and astrology magic. Before becoming a real sorcerer, an apprentice could only learn some simple tricks instead of real first circle magic. In Lucien's viewpoint, the structure of those apprentice spells was very simple. They were just some geometric patterns combined together, which could be triggered by the spells and corresponding magic reagents. There were also 3 levels of the sorcerer apprentices: in training, intermediate, and advanced, graded according to the different levels of spiritual power, which determined how many spells they were able to cast in a row: 5, 10, and 20, respectively. Through meditation, an apprentice could improve his or her spiritual power. With the help of certain magic potions, he or she could start mentally building a first circle magic structure. Those who succeeded would become real sorcerers. Having sufficient spiritual power was the key factor during the process, because the casting of magic from the first circle did not require any spelling, magic reagents, or gestures. Today I met another sorcerer here in Alto. I'm really excited, but he looked a bit weird, very different from the ones hiding. Lucien got really encouraged when he found out that there were still other sorcerers in the city. I found some strange red-eyed rats in the sewers. I detected magic on them, but I cannot trace them yet. My experiment shows that they're very fast-breeding and their blood is toxic, which can lead to hallucinatory experience and paralysis. It is a perfect match for my Lapland bloodvine. I think my magic trap is ready now. But who do those rats belong to? Lucien was shocked to know that the rats didn't belong to the witch. That was to say, there were probably still other dangerous things down there. And the notes kept going. I met the sorcerer again. His thoughts about magic were so unique, his knowledge broad and profound. He was very attractive, but he said that the ancient magic was outdated, except for those really powerful ones which could still be valuable. Also, he mentioned those ancient people were ignorant and uncivilized. I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me. He showed me a magic book called Arcana. It was thin. Actually, he called it a journal. He said that Arcana is the nature, the theory of magic. But I never thought magic could actually be explained. I was shocked. The book, or journal, was first released more than 300 years ago. It started from a script of a great arcanist in a sorcerer conference. 300 years ago. I've never heard of any of this before. After reading it, I was shocked. I don't even know how I came back home. The witch took down some of the script from the journal. Her writing was messy in this part. Lucien could tell her hands were shaking with great excitement. Here was the script in the note. Ladies and gentlemen, many years ago, in order to fight against the magic creatures, our respectable ancestors learned how to exert our spiritual power directly from dragons, elves, giants, and even from demons. They studied them, their bodies, their blood, their inner magic patterns, and thus our ancestors were able to evolve their own human bodies. They left us the meditation to strengthen our spirit. They left us magic structures to empower their offsprings. And they left us a peaceful continent by pushing those evil creatures back into the pits with their great power. Dragons are hiding. Giants migrated. Elves are gone deep inside their forests. Now we are the owners of the land. The great victory, ladies and gentlemen. The great victory had been reminding us for hundreds of years to keep seeking greater power, from the pits to hell, from hell to other dimensions, until the Saint Truth Church gained its power. Within a few hundred years, our empires were conquered, our sorcerers slaughtered and exiled. Our past glory died in the ashes of our castles. It's about time we take a step back and ask ourselves, what on earth are we pursuing? What can we do to prevent our magic from dying? Have you ever thought about the following questions? What's the nature of magic? Why are we endowed with spiritual power? How does that power exist? Are earth, fire, wind, and water really the most basic elements in the world? If they are, how do they stick together to form everything we know? And if not, which are the real magic elements? What's the nature of the soul? Is it different from consciousness? Do we need any certain tools to help us with the magic structures? Does God exist? If God exists, who is our God? Why can vampires remain undead forever? n/o/vel/b/in.c//om. Why is there a sun and a moon in the world? Why do they rise and set every day? What keeps them moving in such a manner? If we can explore more about the world itself instead of chasing power around blindly, we can find the truth about magic, know who we are, and understand where we should go. The notes thrilled Lucien as well. When he first came here, he also had many questions about the world. However, he soon forgot all his questions while struggling to survive. These overwhelming questions pointed directly to the origin of the world. Lucian believed that if he could figure them out, he might be able to learn how he came here and how to go back. Even if the Arcanist named Douglas had not completely understood any of the problems, as long as he was still working on them, he should be an extraordinary Arcanist nowadays, comparable to the sorcerers and sorceress of legend. Lucian was organizing his thoughts. There's a journal called Arcana. The witch did meet other sorcerer in this city. Everything seems to indicate there are still safe places for people to learn magic. But why would it be a journal? It sounds pretty academic. Why call him an Arcanist instead of a sorcerer? Does an Arcanist rank higher than a sorcerer? Lucian got more and more excited with his thoughts. He wished he could meet the sorcerer as soon as possible and move somewhere where he could learn magic safely. He would come back to Alto and do something for little Ivan's family when he became stronger. Among all questions, the two Lucian felt most interested in were, are earth, fire, wind, and water really the most basic elements in the world? If they are, how do they stick together to form everything we know? And if not, which are the real magic elements? Why is there a sun and a moon in the world? Why do they rise and set every day? What keeps them moving in such a manner? According to what Lucian had learned before, earth, fire, wind, and water were not basic elements. As for the second question, it drew his attention because they seemed to want to combine the rules of the physical universe with magic, in case Lucian's knowledge might really come in handy to learn magic faster. However, Lucian didn't know how helpful his knowledge would be in this world. It was a world full of incredible creatures, magic, divine power, and souls. Nevertheless, Lucian hadn't met anything that varied from the basic laws of physics, and he did find the same materials like silver, copper, and iron. I might have been wrong before, regarding why some books in my library were locked. Lucian guessed, agitated with the prospect. Gradually, he calmed down. He was now more mature and understood that no matter how great ambition one had, sitting there and daydreaming would not change anything. After all, every person still had to be practical. He turned to the last page of the note. Sometimes, during the break of my meditation and experiments, I think about him. He's wise, elegant, and attractive. He said he came here to Alto for an important secret mission. If everything goes well, in some months he might take me to the heaven of our sorcerers and sorceress, the Continental Congress of Magic. We have an appointment in the cemetery. I wonder what he'll tell me. The witch's notes ended here. She and her sorcerer friend must have been ambushed by the night watchman. I wonder if the sorcerer managed to escape, Lucian thought with some disappointment. The Continental Congress of Magic was his only clue for now, but he had no idea how to find other hiding sorcerers and sorceresses. Taking a deep breath, Lucian decided to start his first meditation. He eliminated all the distractions in his mind and got ready for it. Following the note, Lucian kept his breaths long and gentle. Along with the breathing, he let his spirit freely spread like water, and then drew it back in, similar to waves, again and again until he entered into a blank world. A world where nothing existed. Talented as the witch was, it took her more than 2 years to reach this level, plus another year to augment her spirit until it was strong enough to sense the surrounding magic elements as a junior apprentice. However, after becoming a junior apprentice, it would still take quite a while before one could move forward and become a real sorcerer or sorceress. An apprentice needed to keep forging his or her spirit by doing meditation. Having started meditating when she was 10, the witch became an apprentice at the age of 13. A year later, she became an intermediate apprentice and was really satisfied with her progress. But then, since she was not good at analyzing the patterns of magic and building their structures, she could not progress any further. So she tried to use a precious magic potion called Magic Gate to break through the bottleneck. Lucian felt both disappointed and excited. From the witch's note, Lucian understood that learning magic did take time. So unfortunately, there was no way for him to take revenge on the gangsters within a short period. Actually, as Victor's music student, Lucian was now in no hurry to protect himself with magic, since a mistake could affect his teacher's social status. At the same time, it was exciting because Lucian was unexpectedly great at the meditation. After the bitter fight underground, Lucian's spiritual power was improved by a great extent. It only took him less than 30 seconds to successfully enter into the meditation world. Observant as he was now, Lucian was guessing he could probably shorten the time for becoming a junior apprentice remarkably, doing so probably in months or even weeks. Actually, it was even faster than he thought. The meditation world was very different. Lucian could feel all sorts of power here. Some of them were steady, some restless, others were dynamic, and there were even gentle ones, among others. There, earth, fire, wind, and water. The four elements? My spiritual power has reached the level of a junior apprentice. Lucian was so surprised that he almost failed to maintain his meditation. The badge really helped me a lot. He became truly happy. Soon he would start learning his first magic. N/O/vel/B//in.C//OM. I wonder, why do the four basic elements feel more like forces when Lucian was about to follow the basic element meditation mentioned in astrology and magic elements? A question came to him. Then he noticed the similarity with the question raised by Douglas. Maybe they are actually the four fundamental forces: gravity, weak nuclear force, electromagnetism, and strong nuclear force in the universe. But then gravity would definitely be related to the earth element, while the other three are in fact different manifestations from the other forces, according to what I learned in my world. As soon as the idea came up, Lucian noticed that the world around him changed. A starry sky showed up, and the stars were shining brightly against the dark background. Every star had an invisible string of force hanging down to the earth. Attracting those countless strings, the earth, gentle and profound, was like a silent giant grabbing mysterious ropes in its hand. On the other hand, the remaining three elements, fire, wind, and water, showed no such change, since Lucian could not figure out the corresponding connections between them and the other three forces yet. However, the previous clear boundaries between them were seemingly blurred now. The world changes with my cognition? Lucian was guessing that the sky appeared because he happened to understand the connection between gravity and the earth element. He suddenly recalled an excerpt from the witch's notes. Stars. It was a way of meditation belonging to another school for advanced apprentices. As the note mentioned before, there were 8 schools in the world of magic, and each of them had its own way of meditation. The witch just had a brief description in the note about the astrology school, because it was the element school she majored in. However, as the fundamental way of meditation for the astrology school, the first time an apprentice entered into his or her meditation world, it would allow them to see one's own night sky, from which he or she could choose a host star of destiny by themselves. The star could be connected with the person, which would provide great help in the person's future learning. More importantly, without a host star, magic belonging to astrology, like horoscope, could not be obtained. That school believed that every soul matched a star in the boundless sky. One's destiny kept changing along with his or her host star. The sorcerer would not be able to see the strings of destiny without a connection, and thus could not cast a horoscope. Therefore, even the basic meditation of astrology school required an advanced apprentice's spirit level. Before achieving that requirement, an apprentice was supposed to refer to other ways of meditation to improve their power until they became qualified. In this world, gravity has something to do with destiny? Interesting, Lucian thought to himself. It seems like many things happening here do not comply with my previous knowledge. Or maybe I just cannot understand it fully. Searching in the vast and spectacular sky, soon Lucian located a star in a distance which somehow he felt familiar with. The star was not very bright, seeming like a newborn one. Extending his spirit, Lucian approached the star. Under the guidance of meditation, little by little, Lucian started connecting his spirit with the star. Suddenly, like a string being plucked, Lucian's soul shook and started vibrating fiercely. Knowing it was the hardest but also the most important part in the process, Lucian quickly reached out his spirit again to grab the almost broken string between the star and himself. Gradually, the thin string started shining bright as the stars, and gradually grew stronger. The vibrating slowly disappeared. With a last sudden vibration in the end, an image of the star showed up in his soul. Drawing the power from the star greedily, Lucian continued tempering his soul and spirit until his soul felt swollen. Then he switched to element meditation to improve the interaction and strengthen the bond between his spirit and the elements. The stronger the bond was, the faster one could cast the element-specific spells and shorten the cooldown CD in general. Lucian finally opened his eyes when he started feeling extremely tired deep in his soul. They were full of excitement and ecstasy. Even when I'm not practicing meditation, I can still feel my host star in my soul. And if I focus more, I can even feel that there's a star shining afar in the sky that is connected with me. I can feel the power of the star. But soon he felt confused. Wait, I came here by mistake. I don't belong to this world, so why would I find my host star of destiny here? Theoretically speaking, if someone dies, that person's star would gradually dim until it finally disappeared. But the star I felt just now, it belongs to me, the real me, Xiaofeng. Lucian could not figure it out at the moment. Also, from the notes, Lucian learned that a sorcerer or sorceress needed to use specific magic to measure other people's spiritual power. Only those who just broke through to a new level could be detected in a direct way without using any magic due to the instability of their power. N/O/vel/b/in.c//om. Of course, magic that could hide one's power existed. After taking a very short break, Lucian opened the notes with great excitement. He couldn't wait any longer to see what magic spells were waiting for him. Since he now had the host star of destiny, Lucian could master all 3 apprentice spells in the School of Astrology, which were relatively powerful among those of similar level from other schools. But for now, Lucian's power was only enough to cast the spells 2 to 3 times before his spirit was exhausted. Different levels of apprentice were accessed depending on how many spells an apprentice could cast before exhausting his spirit. An apprentice in training could cast up to 5 spells, while an intermediate doubled that number, and an advanced doubled it again to cast no less than 20 spells before running out of power. That was to say that for now, Lucian could only use up to 5 spells of apprentice level consecutively. As for the astrology magic, probably only 3. When feeling exhausted, one needed to rest or take magic potions to help his or her power to fill up again. The 3 spells of apprentice level were Horoscope, basic level, Eyes of Stars, and Disarming Loop. Among them, Horoscope was the best-known one. Even the basic level required lots of knowledge to understand the movement of stars and tell the precise moment to tell the fortune. It took the witch several years to barely understand some of them, but her predictions were often inaccurate. While for Lucian, the most challenging part was to find a crystal ball made of pure and precious morning-light crystal. He had no idea where to find one. The witch's crystal ball came from her family, but it was taken away by the church. As for the astrology-related basic knowledge, which the witch found very complex, Lucian realized it was basically just celestial mechanics of high school level, but it was described in a messy way. However, Lucian could not explain with his current knowledge why a star would have something to do with a person's fate. Picturing himself in the future, sitting in front of a crystal ball and casting spells, Lucian felt thrilled. If he wore a black sorcerer's robe, Lucian had the impression he would look more like an evil wizard. Eyes of Stars and hypnotism magic. The caster needed to have the person staring at his eyes. Disarming Loop. Lucian's understanding was that the magic could use the gravity from the stars and build an about 20-centimeter thick loop in which the gravity could be controlled. It was a magic mainly used for defense. Lucian decided to start by protecting himself. He would learn Disarming Loop. Besides, the other spells all required other materials. For example, Eyes of Stars needed Night Star, a type of herb, as its reagent. And almost all the element-specific spells had similar requirements. Although Lucian could also learn magic from other schools, his meditation technique would make it easier for him to start with astrology and element. Keeping himself focused, Lucian cast the strange spell in a low voice. trying to search for the power in the hanging string connecting the star with his own host star. He felt his spirit started vibrating with the casting. It was possible to feel the gravity from the star. Hurriedly, Lucien tried to shape his spirit according to the simple magic pattern in the notes. However, before the pattern was created, the combination of his spirit and the gravity ceased. Lucien had failed. After 5 failures, finally his efforts were successful. An almost invisible loop of soft light fell down on the table, surrounding a previously lit candle. Controlled by Lucien, the candle flame was suddenly constrained, and in the next second soared up in the air. After 2 minutes of practice, Lucien stopped. Crossing his fingers, Lucien bit his lip thoughtfully. I'm not able to create a big difference in gravity. The loop might be barely enough for people to lose control of their weapons to some extent, but not strong enough to disarm them completely. After all, it's just an apprentice spell, and it takes me too long to cast it. If I practice more, I should be able to create the loop within 3 seconds. Anyway, it is my first magic. Lucien was glad that he could master disarming loop in such a short time, while it took the witch more than a month. The witch explained in the note that the difficulty came from the fact that she couldn't understand why would the stars lead to the chaos of the earth element. So she had no choice but to practice over and over again without knowing the reason. But I know the reason behind gravity. It seems the saying also works here in this world. Knowledge is power. Recalling the whole process, Lucien tried to reduce the casting time. I felt the spell just created a certain frequency and then made my spirit start vibrating with it. What if I just remember and follow the specific frequency and skip the spell? The answer was yes, but it definitely required a spiritual power control of a higher level. After a long time of practice, Lucien was exhausted and he had to call it a day, but by then he had reduced the activating time, no casting since there was no spell needed now, to a bit more than 3 seconds. I need more practice tomorrow, and I'll try to find some common materials for magic potions. Lucien's brain was not working properly due to his sleepiness. Even if a sorcerer or sorceress didn't aim at being an alchemist, the process of learning from creating magic potions was still very significant. There were over 10 different magic potions in the notes. Every one of them was amazing. For example, Brown Owl was helpful for restoring energy. The most precious among them were 3. Magic Gate provided a great boost for those apprentices who found themselves stuck because of certain magic structures. Silver Moon was a potion that could help the apprentice during the process of breakthrough. And Crying Soul could reveal the power hidden in a developed body, or so to speak, an adult. For now, Crying Soul was the one Lucien was longing for the most. The materials required for Magic Gate and Silver Moon were precious and hard to find. They also demanded a higher level of spiritual power, close to the one a real sorcerer had. Only Crying Soul could be used on any healthy person, becoming a very famous potion back in the days when the ancient sorcerers were trying to have more low-level squires to face moments of crisis. But there was also a side effect. The potion would overdraw one's strength, causing problems in the future development. If a person became a knight by using Crying Soul, he wouldn't be as strong as the normally trained ones in the future, and his final development would be overall inferior. But for Lucien, he never really expected being a knight. It was just a good way for him to become stronger quickly. The problem was that even the materials for Crying Soul were still not that very easy to collect. They were either expensive or very strange. And Lucien was not yet an adult, so the potion might be dangerous for him. The stronger the person was, the greater chance of success for the procedure. Crying Soul belonged to the necromancy school. Its simplified magic formula was corpse mushroom plus aquatic zombie brain tissue plus revenant dust plus moonlight rose dust equals Crying Soul potion. Corpse mushrooms grew on dead bodies. Before they were ripe, they were white like milk but then turned black within a day. They could last for 1 month when they were ripe. Smelling them could lead the person to suffer from light delusion. If someone ate the mushroom, they would be infected with diseases from the corpse. The darker the color was, the better the quality the potion would have. It was the same for the other materials. Stronger aquatic zombies and revenant with stronger hatred would improve the potion's effect as well. Moonlight Rose was precious and expensive, costing about a gold thale per gram, 100 silver nars. It shone like the silver moon at night. Also, high-level knight squires would use the rose to help them awaken the blessing in their blood. One dose would need at least 10 grams if everything went well. The witch once tried to make a crying soul potion to become stronger, in order to help on the search for snow gorse later. After all, the potion could help a person fight in the same conditions with a level 1 knight. And there were just about 400 knights in the whole duchy. She could not afford the rose. But the witch mentioned in her notes that there were aquatic zombies along the Balem River at night. She also recorded that the revenant dust could be obtained by summoning a low-level revenant, using the blood of evil creatures, which was also an apprentice-level necromancy spell. Lucien had no better options available. The only thing he could do now was keep practicing and strengthening his spiritual power, while at the same time trying to find these materials secretly. n/o/vel/b/c/jen.c//om. Approaching the month of fire, the sun rose much earlier than before. The orange-colored clouds were slowly changing as they crossed the sky like blooming flowers. Lucien succeeded in activating Disarming Loop again. He already knew that the spelling was not necessary if he first made his spirit resonate in the same frequency of the spell. However, that method was more energy-consuming. He was disappointed to see that without the spelling, activating the magic even once could drain his spiritual power completely. After doing meditation, Lucien felt invigorated. He tidied his messy place a little bit, leaving no proof of the magic practice, and headed to Auntie Elisa's house. "Morning, Lucien. Come and join us for breakfast." Ivan opened the door. Recently, he was helping his mom in the Textile Association, and thus looked more mature now. "Sure. I plan my arrival time just to be able to have breakfast." Lucien smiled. "You're playing the funny now, little Evans." Joel was having the veggie soup with dark bread. He was happy to see Lucien's growth. "You seem more confident now." Every Sunday morning, those faithful ones among the citizens would go to the St. Truth Church. Lucien did not want to go with them because was too afraid of being found out. So he always sought different excuses not to join them. "Have some hot soup, little Evans." Auntie Elisa scooped a bowl of hot soup and handed it over to Lucien. Lucien was starving from his previous meditation and casting. Sipping the hot soup with dark bread, Lucien felt much better. The dark bread here was still not tasty. Lucien could taste some wheat bran mixed in the bread, and it was much better than what he had at home. His bread tasted like pure wood. "Uncle Joel, I got something else to do tomorrow." "Sorry, but I can't go with you to the church." Despite the risk, Lucien also had no time to waste with that. "Don't you have to work in the market tomorrow?" Auntie Elisa asked. Lucien pulled out the old purse and gave it back to Joel. He smiled and answered, "I'm Mr. Victor's admitted student now. I'm going to study music under Mr. Victor." And Lucien paused a bit. "He will teach me for free?" "What?" Joel almost choked on the bread. His face turned red from coughing. "He allowed you to learn music there? You just wanted to learn how to read like a week ago." Clearly Elisa had a different focus. "For free? Really for free?" Ivan gasped in great admiration. "Lucien, what did you do?" Lucien told them the full story. "I'm pretty lucky to have this opportunity. I'm going to visit Mr. Victor tomorrow morning and borrow some related books." In fact, Lucien was going to study at Victor's place this afternoon to make up for lesson they had missed. But it was also a very good excuse for him to be absent from the church again. And he was going to visit Mr. Victor tomorrow morning again to collect more books in his spirit library. Being a musician was a perfect cover for Lucien. He had to take it seriously. "Oh, Mr. Victor, what a generous, nice, and talented gentleman." Elisa was touched again. "Thanks God. God bless you, little Evans. After so many difficulties, your beautiful new life has finally come." Joel stared at Lucien for a while with complicated emotions. Finally, he started patting on Lucien's shoulder with great joy. His voice was trembling. "You're lucky, yes. But you're also smart, diligent, and gifted. Mr. Victor is an awesome teacher, and I'm sure you can accomplish big achievements in the future. Do your best, little Evans. If you manage to have a chance to play in the Psalm Hall, let me be there to watch you. Then I will have no regrets in music in my life." On the opposite side of the table, Ivan was nodding as well. Then I can tell my friends that I have two elder brothers. One is a knight, and the other is a great musician. Cool. Of course, Uncle Joel, I'll work hard. Lucien nodded seriously, but sighed in his heart. He felt sorry that he wouldn't be able to put lots of energy and time in music. Last night, Lucien had been drawn into the amazing magic world. For him, being a musician was just a camouflage and a way of making money for learning magic. Joel loved music deep within his heart, but Lucien did not. He did not know much about music here, but from his experience, many songs he heard before were very beautiful, and some of them shared the same features with the classical masterpieces on Earth. Putting the purse back, Joel reminded Lucien, "When you decide what instrument you'd like to start with, don't be shy and come here to ask for help." "Sure. Thank you so much, Uncle Joel, Auntie Elisa. I'm planning to find a new job as well, but not in the market. I'm Mr. Victor's student now, so I hope it'll be a bit easier." Finished the breakfast, it was time for Lucien to leave. After reading the magic notes, Lucien knew that learning magic was very expensive. He had to hurry up and make money. Lucien didn't go directly to the market after leaving. Instead, he went back home for his wood stick and started practicing basic fighting skills as usual. Since Lucien's spirit was not strong enough, being physically strong was also very important. Besides, the stronger the person was, the more likely they would successfully get improved by the Crying Soul Potion. An hour later in the market, it had been 5 days since Lucien came here last time. The market area was busy as usual. Human and other kinds of humanoid creatures were walking around and bargaining. The assorted shops and stores were like colorful mushrooms in the woods. Lucien was very careful when he was walking on the streets. The gangsters would probably take revenge on him. But Lucien was pretty sure that with his good perception, he would notice if anyone tried to attack him. However, until he finished buying the materials and was ready to leave, not even a single gangster came to bother him. In fact, the gangsters on the street were in much smaller numbers than usual. They were often in groups of 2 or 3, but today most of them were hanging around alone. Lucien was pretty confused. No matter what happened, Lucien still had to be careful and try to master all the apprentice spells as soon as possible. Although these spells were not very powerful, Lucien believed that they were already enough for dealing with a bunch of gangsters holding daggers. It took Lucien more than 3 hours just to buy 3 of these materials. Worrying that his shopping might bring any suspiciousness, he was very cautious and decided not to buy anything that was not used for common tasks. He bought some sulfur, which was very useful for disinfestation in the month of fire, night star, a type of plant that could promote sleep quality, and ice stone that could be used for keeping stuff fresh. For the materials that could be found outside of the city, Lucien definitely wouldn't buy them. The shopping cost Lucien an NAR and 20 fells, which represented half of his savings. But what he bought was only enough for about 100 experiments. Among them, the most expensive one was Nightstar, followed by Ice Stone, but sulfur was the cheapest as expected. Lucien sighed. "I'd better be careful with these experiments. I really can't afford to waste any material." Spells like Acid Splash and Freezing Rays would definitely mess Lucien's place, and he was afraid that someone would notice it during daytime. So he decided to find a new place for practicing, the sewers. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Lucien started his study on time at Victor's house. An hour later, the class was over. After Renee, Colin, and Annie left, Victor asked in a gentle voice, "Lucien, do you have a job now?" There were only 4 students left in the living room: Lot, Felicia, Herodotus, and Lucien. Shaking his head, Lucien answered with slight depression, "No, sir. I lost my job for some reason. I'm still looking for a new one." It was kind of embarrassing for Lucien to admit, but he was also a bit excited. Did Mr. Victor have a job offer? Studying here from 2 to 6 in the afternoon every day can be quite demanding for you. I know you gotta support yourself. Even if you can study here for free, I guess you're still facing a pretty big challenge with your living expenses. Victor tried to be careful with his words to avoid undermining Lucien's self-esteem. He asked Colin and Renee before, so he knew that a poor guy like Lucien had to work at least 10 hours a day to barely support himself. "I know a relatively easy job. You work 4 hours every morning and you get 10 NARs every month. What do you think? Lucien felt so touched facing this kind offer. Although he had been through many difficulties and bad things before, Lucien felt he was so lucky to have many kind people helping him like Uncle Joel, Auntie Elisa, and Mr. Victor. Yes, sure. That's awesome. It's very kind of you. You don't even know what kind of work it is. Victor smiled. It's a job in the association library. They are short of hands now. Another good thing is that when you work there, you can have access to many music or theory-related books. I think it'll be pretty helpful. Not being sure of Lucien's music talent, Victor wanted him to be a basic-level musician first to support himself. Then Lucien could advance forward to the next step if he was really born for this. That was another surprise for Lucien. He never thought he could have a chance working in a library. He was so excited and happy that the only thing he could do was say thank you to Victor many times. Victor was the only reason why Lucien could get this job. People in the association knew that this job was mainly for Mr. Victor's student. Lucien was working like a dog all day long for just 3 nars a month. Now Lucien could work for a salary similar to what a common citizen could earn every month. That was another reason why so many people wanted to be Mr. Victor's music students. Great! Victor clapped his hands with joy. This afternoon, I'm going to take Lot, Felicia, and Herodotus to the association for rehearsal. You can come with us together and sign the contract. Then you can start working tomorrow. When Victor went back upstairs to find some of his music work, Lot came and smiled to Lucien. Hi, Lucien. I'm Lot. Lot Griffith. We haven't really talked to each other before. I'm here to say that Mr. Victor is a very, very nice teacher and a very kind man as well. I hope you won't let him down as his music student. Lot was pretty unhappy with this newcomer suddenly becoming one of Mr. Victor's music students. In his eyes, there was definitely no position in the world of musician for a poor, uneducated, and ignorant boy like Lucien. As a noble from the Griffith family, he felt ashamed of studying with the poor. But from Mr. Victor's words, Lot found out that Victor was expecting Lucien to be a common musician first, not really a music master. Therefore, his anger and dissatisfaction turned into Noble's arrogance and pride, looking down upon the poor and miserable guy standing in front of him. Mr. Victor must be happy, so I'm willing to accept him, Lot thought to himself. He always tried to give a good impression to Victor in order to become his most outstanding student. Lucien was not very interested in Lot's intention because he knew that he had a different path to go magic. He just replied politely, I won't. Thank you, Lot. I'm Lucien Evans. I'm Felicia Hain. Politely but also coldly, the red-haired girl nodded to Lucien. She didn't believe Lucien would achieve something in music. Besides, she couldn't allow herself to get too close to a poor guy. It was bad for her reputation. And Herodotus, who always disliked Lucien, also did just a simple self-introduction like Felicia. The hall of the Musicians' Association. Stepping on the thick and soft carpet, Lucien was following Mr. Victor to the reception counter, while the other students were practicing upstairs. Good afternoon, Mr. Victor. The cute girl Elena slightly bowed and greeted him. N/O/vel/B/gen.C//om. Good afternoon, Elena. Victor was always kind to everyone. This is Lucien, my new music student. From tomorrow on, he will be working in the library. Can you kindly help him sign the contract and hand it to Mr. Hank later? She nodded and took out the already prepared contract and a quill. When she was passing Lucien the contract, her green eyes were opened with surprise. Lucien, it's you. No wonder I just thought it was a familiar name. She couldn't believe her own eyes. About more than a week ago, Lucien, the guy from the slum, was rummaging through trash from the association. Today he was standing here as Mr. Victor's music student. What a crazy world. Hi, Elena. Nice to see you again. Lucien took the contract and started reading it. Still not very good at reading. It took him quite a while to understand the few lines on the paper, during which Elena finally calmed down and was staring at Lucien with great curiosity. You can do fingerprint or sign here. Either way is fine. She smiled. You changed so much since last time I saw you. You know, Lucien? Victor asked. You were there at that time as well. Mr. Victor, Elena started explaining to him. Lucien finished reading and wrote down his name slowly. I see. No wonder I feel I've seen you before somewhere. You're always diligent, Lucien. You'll be successful if you keep working hard in music. Succeed in music? Victor, are you prepared for the concert? A sharp voice came from behind them. It was Wolf, the brown-haired musician with a protruding jaw. Lucien still remembered him. With his latest progress, Victor was more confident when facing Wolf's bitter challenge now. After a fierce competition, Victor and Wolf were the last two competitors remaining. In Victor's opinion, Wolf lost the chance in the end because he spent too much time on criticizing other musicians' work instead of investing more energy in studying music itself. I do think so, Wolf. Actually, I'm pretty happy with my new work. Do you want to give me some suggestion on it? Victor had registered his new piano concerto at the association. There was no chance for Wolf to try to plagiarize it. Wolf thought Victor was still very frustrated with his work. Now Victor's confidence was something beyond his expectation. Wolf's face turned ashen and he murmured, "Not really, Victor. I'd rather keep my curiosity. We'll see it in 3 months." Shrugging his shoulders, Victor smiled. "All right. I was quite looking forward to your opinion." Wolf just wanted to get rid of this topic, and he saw Lucien was standing aside in his cheap and old linen clothes. Raising his chin, he asked in contempt, "When did you become friends with people from the slum?" That behavior came from a long time ago when Wolf's family still ranked among nobles. From his great-grandfather on, Wolf's family lost the title, but it did not prevent him from regarding himself as a noble. He looked down upon the musicians like Victor who came from common families, not to mention poor people like Lucien. His arrogance was mixed with the hatred towards Victor, so in his eyes Lucien was comparable to a disgusting mouse jumping onto his dinner table. Lucien was a bit angry, but he was already used to this kind of contempt. As long as there was social status and wealth in a world, people would be divided into different levels, the superior and the inferior, the decent and the filthy. The only way for a person to change the situation was striving for power and wealth. But once someone succeeded, they would often join the group and become one among the ones who looked down upon the common folk. "Mind your words, Wolf." Frowning his eyebrows, Victor warned him seriously, "Lucien's my new music student. He's a very talented young lad." Honestly speaking, Victor boasted about Lucien's ability. He was not sure about Lucien's music gift yet. "Are you serious, Victor? Really?" Wolf started laughing so hard that he almost lost his footing. "You got that nervous with your performance and lost your mind?" Lacking a bit of confidence, Victor tried to fight back. "Alto is the city of Psalm, the city of music. Everyone here can have a chance at learning music. Many outstanding bards are of poor background. The talent of music is a gift from God, and God doesn't only bless the wealthy and the noble." Wolf shook his head while he was still laughing. "Come on, Victor. Both you and I know that a talent can easily awaken the blessing in their blood. We call people like Princess Natasha and Lord Verdi talents, but your student, get real. If he managed to become an outstanding musician in the future, I will do an open apology to you and your student on music criticism and never hold my own concert again." Wolf made the bet on impulse, but he was pretty cautious as well. He added the word outstanding on purpose since it was really hard to reach a consensus on what really made an outstanding artist. Lucien heard that Princess Natasha, also known as the Violet Countess, was the only child of the Grand Duke of Orveret, and her current title was also one of the prerequisites to become the Grand Duke of the Duchy. She was very gifted in music and had excellent skills in playing violin, flute, and harpsichord. Besides, the 25-year-old princess was also an outstanding level 5 Grand Knight, who was expected to become a Radiant Knight soon. Lord Verdi, the nephew of the Grand Duke and also a member of the Violet family, just became a level 5 Grand Knight and was currently serving as the chief commander of the city guards in Alto. After making the comment, Wolf directly turned and left the hall. Victor shook his head in repulsion. "Lucien, just ignore him. Everyone knows Wolf is a total bastard. Your work starts from tomorrow. 1 day off a week. You can arrange your day off with the library administrators. I have to go to the Odeon now." Lucien nodded and watched Mr. Victor leave the hall. Then he turned to Elena and gave the contract back to her. "Thank you, Elena," he said. There was a sweet little dimple in Elena's left cheek. "No worries, it's my job. Like Mr. Victor said, never let Mr. Wolf bother you. He's always like that." looking down upon most people in the association, except several directors with titles. I'm looking forward to seeing Mr. Wolf's high-lifted jaw digging a hole into the carpet along with the noble directors. Lucian shrugged a bit and smiled. Elena started giggling with his words. When Lucian was about to leave, Elena stopped him. Her right hand clenched into a small fist, and her face looked serious. I believe in you, Lucian. You can be an outstanding musician. Mr. Wolf would deeply regret his bet. Honestly speaking, Lucian did not take the bet seriously. But he also raised his fist like Elena and replied, I certainly will. There was no nightlife in Audiobook. At 9 o'clock at night, most residents in this area were already in bed, except for several drunkards who were still hanging around. Everybody else had to prepare for the hard work in the following morning. Lucian told Joel and Elisa he got a new job over dinner, and then went back to his shack to meditate and prepare for his magic experiments. Gently closing the door, Lucian sneaked out of his shack and walked towards one of the entrances to the sewers. It would still take Lucian quite some time to learn how to build a secret passage like the witch did. After making sure that no one was watching, Lucian stepped into the underground world. The stinking smell and the slimy wall were still the same, disgusting and gloomy, but none of that would prevent him from exploring magic. Walking in the pipes, Lucian was mapping in his spirit library and trying to find a proper corner to start his experiments. He also scraped off some of the moss on the wall and put them into his pocket. It was called light moss, which was the reagent for the apprentice magic extinguishment. The deeper Lucian went, the more gruesome the place became. Down there, Lucian never met any homeless guy, like Corella mentioned. The sound of his footsteps was intensified within the sewers. Lucian could even hear his own breath. N/O/vel/b/in.c//om. Finally, Lucian found his ideal place, a forked path. The front way was blocked by a huge rock, while the one turning left went further into the darkness. Lucian could easily notice if anyone was approaching him from this position. Lucian pinched some sulfur from his pocket, while recalling the structure of the magic. Then he started casting a strange spell, and the powder slipped through his fingers. His face looked serious and mysterious in the cold. After practicing many times, when dawn was drawing near, Lucian finally mastered the 5 apprentice spells: Eyes of Stars, Freezing Rays, Darkness, Mage's Hand, and Acid Splashing. Furthermore, now Lucian could activate Disarming Loop without a verbal component in about 3 seconds. It took the witch much longer to understand all these spells. It was amazing how Lucian could grasp them in such a short period of time. In his eyes, these magic structures were related to different mathematical models and the knowledge of planar geometry. After reviewing what he had learned before in high school, Lucian found they were actually pretty easy to be understood. Here, magic could be explained by science. In acid splashing, for example, sulfur was transformed into sulfuric acid. However, Lucian had a hard time understanding how darkness worked. His far-fetched guess was that the magic reconstructed the light moss and made it absorb the light. As expected, Lucian had to spend more time to master the darkness spell. Lucian reflected on his magic experiment. His knowledge from the past, like physics and chemistry, was useful, but it could not be used to explain everything in this magic world. There were some similarities shared between this place and the earth, but there were also many things he couldn't understand, like those precious metals and magic materials. He knew he should explore the world more by himself. After a 10-minute break, Lucian started doing some simple cleaning. These apprentice spells are not powerful enough. Rubbing the floor, Lucian thought to himself, they can only kill someone when they hit the vital parts, or the most they could do is make the person move slower or suffer a bit. But Lucian was not disappointed. He knew that if need arose, they could still be more than helpful. Finishing the cleaning, Lucian carefully hid the materials nearby. He didn't go back to the surface directly, but continued his exploration towards the end of the outlets. He was looking for corpse mushroom, which meant he had to find some carcasses first. Searching in a graveyard under the nose of the church was too risky. Lucian heard that many poor people, who had no families or friends, died lonely and miserably down there. Besides, dead animals and rotten flesh were even easier to be found. the witch did not mention any possible danger in the pipes. But Lucien was still very cautious, staying alert to any sign of trouble. N/O/vel/b/in.c//om. Within 20 minutes, Lucien had found 2 dead rats and a jelly-like creature body, but no corpse mushroom was there. Turning around a corner, an open area appeared in front of Lucien. That was where the homeless people lived. The sewer here was very broad. An underground river was flowing slowly with waste floating in the middle, which went all the way to the Belem River. On both sides of the river, old dirty rugs and pots were scattered everywhere. The clothes the beggars were wearing could barely cover their bodies. "Why did you come here, young lad? You don't belong here," an old man probably in his 60s asked Lucien. His ribs stood out like arching blades. However, when Lucien heard his voice, the old man sounded like he was only 40 or something. Lucien's old but clean linen clothes were far from decent, but compared to what they were wearing, the youngster looked like a noble. "I have a friend who also lives here." Lucien tried to sound confident and strong. He must hide his feeling of insecurity in front of these guys, or they would think it was easy to prey on the teen standing there. Several beggars behind the old man stood up. Their eyes were full of greed and ferocity. Lucien was not scared. Instead, he pulled out his dagger and took a step forward. The beggars did not dare take any further action. On the contrary, they were now standing in a defensive position. At this time, the old man started grinning. "You don't look like a guy with a decent job, young lad. None of your business," Lucien answered coldly. "Anyway, I can tell you're not doing very well. Even a hard-working young lad, like you couldn't afford proper bread and beef. It's not your fault." Lucien was not sure about the old man's intention. The St. Truth Church tells people that all of us are God's servants. But why can the noble live an extravagant life while the poor have to suffer every day and night? There's no difference between us, and all human beings are born with sin. I'm not interested in your nonsense. Although his words were pretty obscure, Lucien knew the old man was trying to preach, but obviously not the St. Truth. No matter what the old man believed in, other gods or demons, Lucien had no interest in it. The price for having something to do with a heresy in this world could be his own life. He did not want to end up being tied to a stake and burned to ashes alive. Facing such direct rejection, the old man and the other beggars were very angry. Their belief was blasphemed. Lucien knew it was time to get away from those guys. He started walking towards the outlets slowly and calmly, grabbing his shiny dagger in his hand. "Anyone want to try me?" Lucien stared at them fearlessly. When he walked by, Lucien noticed that there was a clean black cloth lying on the ground, on which there was a shiny silver-colored horn. He remembered these beggars were sitting around the cloth when he arrived here. The beggars were hesitant. No one wanted to fall on Lucien. Finally, they gave up and sat back on the ground. After walking for another 10 minutes, the sound of the river flow gradually became louder. Here should be the end of the sewers. The underground river joins the Belem River here, Lucien thought to himself. There was an iron net covering the water outlet at the confluence, and tons of floating trash accumulated in front of the net. Lucien slowed down his pace. He was hoping that he could find more dead bodies here. Lucien did not find anything until he walked towards the end of the sewer. When he started feeling disappointed and was about to go back to the surface, Lucien suddenly noticed that the net was missing a part under the water. Out of curiosity, Lucien grabbed the net and tried to shake it. As expected, there was a big hole under there on the iron net. What was really unexpected was that, at this time, a black bulk of something gradually surfaced from the water. Lucien moved closer. It was a dead body, swollen and rotten. Many parts of its skin had fallen off. The clothes on the body were tangled with lots of trash, which increased the buoyancy a lot. Lucien felt very disgusted and also a bit scared. However, he was still trying to see if there was any corpse mushroom on it. There was a long wound on its chest. Someone cut the poor man open vertically and took away his heart. Checking with the dagger, Lucien's eyebrows frowned. "Wait, this is my purse?" Lucien was shocked. He picked the purse up using the dagger and was certain that it was the purse which was taken away by the gangster some days ago. "Why is it here?" Lucien was confused. Then he looked at the face of the dead body. The corpse was so badly decomposed that it took Lucien quite a while to finally recognize the guy. Andre? A strong stench of death came out from Andre's rotten face. A face on which Lucien could still tell his great fear and pain before he died. The gangsters under Aaron are acting weird recently. Does it have anything to do with Andre's death? Lucien had absolutely no clue. Wrapping his hand with a piece of cloth, Lucien pressed Andre's body hard back into the water. This time the body did not hook on the iron net. It was washed away directly into the Balem River and disappeared. Lucien stood up and set off for the surface. But to avoid the beggars, he did not take the same route. According to the map he drew in his spirit library, he took another direction about 20 meters away from the place where the beggars gathered. If the map was correct, Lucien would pass by the ruins of the witch's chamber and come back to the ground from the same entrance through which he came down earlier. Several meters away from the corner, Lucien heard the sound of some heavy footsteps and suddenly stopped. The footsteps echoed in the sewers, loud and clear. It sounded like there were a bunch of people approaching, and some of them must be pretty big. Lucien looked around calmly. Soon he found there was a hole in the wall, big enough for someone to hide. Lucien hid himself in the hole, with his back against the wall. A while later, those guys walked directly past him, turning around a corner a few steps ahead. In such a dark place, they would not notice Lucien hiding in the hole without a careful check. Throw these bodies into the river. Hurry up. It was a low voice from a man. However, he was speaking indistinctly, as if he missed some front teeth. N/O/vel/B//and.C//OM. Lucien felt he had heard this voice somewhere before, but could not remember where. Why did it take you guys so long? Remember, don't screw up the whole plan. It was the old man's voice. After a few seconds of silence, the first man answered with slight fear. Sorry, but within 10 days, we promise it will be enough. At any cost, like Aaron said. Aaron? Rose and Aaron? Now Lucien finally recognized the first voice. It was Jackson, the guy who smashed Lucien's shack. And also because of Lucien, Jackson could not even speak clearly now. From their conversations, Lucien's guess was that the Aaron gang was by no means a victim of the heresy, but an accomplice, and probably Andre was killed because of his disobedience. The old man's voice was very unpleasant. Please tell Mr. Aaron and the other guy that as long as you continuously spare no efforts in helping us grow, you will all receive huge rewards. I know that in your eyes, I'm only a dying, useless old man, which is true, but we are just tiny worms on the ground. Our priests are already powerful enough to beat their bishop. We wouldn't need any of your help were it not for maintaining that thing. I will, Jackson answered in a low mood. But, Jackson, I don't think we can meet their requirement. Another voice came, trembling. We gotta make sure that those are people that no one would care about. Homeless guys are ideal, but we cannot find any of them down here, other than his people. That's true, Jackson. It's too difficult to find 50 of them within 10 days. Someone else agreed. The old man laughed. The rest of them are at the bottom of the Balem River. Eels in the river will clean them up for us. Scar, Aaron told us to make it at any cost. We don't necessarily have to focus on homeless guys. If they're just the poor, Aaron will be able to handle this. A cold smile appeared on Jackson's face. You have any target already, Jackson? Scar was a bit surprised. Yes, I do. Jackson's face turned hideous. They gotta pay the price. The two little bastards and their families. Lucien was shocked. His anger was burning his guts. He knew Jackson hated them, but he never expected that the thug could be so cruel and inhuman to the point of planning to kill the whole family. But thank God Lucien was here and found out about Jackson's plan. I gotta solve the problem here and now. The plan of killing them all in the sewers arose in Lucien's mind. He couldn't let them go back onto the ground, or he would not be able to protect John's family anymore. Lucien must kill them all. Then Lucien could tell John about the heresy, and no one would know what happened down here. Many thoughts quickly passed through his mind. Lucien's reached out to his pocket and made sure that all the magic materials were in position. Carefully, he creeped out of the hole and approached the corner. They had 9 people there, but Lucien had no choice. Staying calm was his most important and powerful weapon. Throwing the last sack into the water, Scar poked the body bag with a long pole in fear. Although they were gangsters, gouging out people's hearts alive was still too much for them, and they also believed in the God of truth. So they prayed in their mind, begging for forgiveness. Jackson, all of the bags are gone. Glancing at the weird old man, Scar carefully asked, "We'd better go now. I heard there are a lot of aquatic zombies in the Belem River." Jackson turned to the old man. "Does it have anything to do with the bodies we threw away? I've never heard of zombies in the river before." The old man shook his head. "We don't want any trouble while we're not strong enough." Alto was the core city of the previous magic empire. Maybe some kind of death power was sealed deep within the river, and now the seal is no longer effective. All right. When Jackson was about to leave with his men, he saw Scar's terrified face. At the same time, Jackson heard a weird, low voice murmuring in the back, like a spell. 20 meters away from them, there was a dark humanoid shadow standing there. Half of his body and face were hidden in the darkness. In the shimmer of the moss, the mysterious shadow was even more strange and terrifying. Ghost! Scar screamed at the top of his lungs. Since he was involved in this, his conscience was tortured by the fear that the people they killed would come back and seek revenge. When he closed his eyes, the warm and bloody hearts that they took from those people's chests when they were still alive were still beating in his mind. Great fear seized him. Scar now could not even move at all. The ghost raised his right hand, and some shimmering powder fell through its fingers. Jackson and the old man started running as soon as they saw the ghost, but all of a sudden they were devoured by complete darkness. The glimmer from the moss disappeared. The darkness spread quickly like a bottle of spilled ink, and no light could penetrate it. They couldn't see anything. Except for the old man, the rest of them were crazily wielding their daggers, trying to keep the bloody ghost away. The pipe was narrow. They hurt each other by accident, and some of them started screaming in pain. But fear and panic did not help them at all. Darkness, an apprentice spell. It could block all kinds of natural light in an area no larger than 6 by 6 meters, enveloping everything in complete darkness. For now, as an apprentice, Lucien could maintain the spell for 1 minute. "You idiots! Calm down! Stop!" Although he could not cast a single spell, the old man heard the priest mentioning about different kinds of magic before. Ouch! However, before the old man made that command, Jackson's dagger scratched him. Within little more than 10 seconds, 2 guys got stabbed by the chaotic attacks of daggers and fell on the ground. The others were also injured to some extent. Driven by the horrible fear, Scar and other 3 guys started running backwards. In the darkness, 2 of them fell into the river like the body bags, while the old man, Jackson, another thug, started rushing towards a shadow. At this time, the weird spell-casting voice arose again. After a few more steps, the old man finally broke the siege of darkness. However, his eyes were no longer accustomed to the weak light from the moss. It was just a blink. When he opened his eyes again, some kind of pungent, dark green liquid hit his face directly. Ow! The shrill cry from the old man scared the rest of them. Jackson looked back subconsciously, even though he could not see anything. With both hands covering his eyes, the old man was rolling on the ground in horrible pain. The skin of his face burned and turned black instantly. His scream was so bitter that Jackson and the rest of them shuddered with fear. Several seconds later, the old man fell into the river and the scream disappeared. Jackson knew there was no way to escape. They would either kill the shadow or be killed by it. Their only hope was to fight it. Run! Run close to that fucking thing! Jackson yelled and dashed to the shadow. Then he saw it was Lucien. Jackson was furious. Hatred replaced his fear, and the only thing in his mind was to tear the fucking bastard up into thousands of pieces. When he was about to throw his dagger towards Lucien, he saw a blue beam of light in Lucien's hand. Jackson hurriedly dodged to the left and barely avoided it. Unfortunately for them, the other thug following behind him was not that lucky. The light beam hit directly in his face, and a thin layer of ice quickly filmed his eyes, nose, and mouth. Freezing cold invaded the guy's brain and made him lose most of his power before he could smash the ice. The guy was choked. Then he banged his head fiercely on the ground. At this time, Jackson finally realized that the person standing in front of him was no more that weak poor guy. However, he became a wizard, an evil wizard with terrible power. Jackson was not an idiot. He understood that by no means Lucien would let him go. Grabbing his dagger, he leaped at Lucien's throat with all his strength. N/O/vel/B/in.C//om. Suddenly, Jackson felt a heavy pressure fell on him, and then his legs caved. Then his body fell down directly onto the ground. Fuck! Jackson swore desperately. He did not know what was going on there, but he knew that losing his footing at this point would be fatal. Longer before Lucien cast Acid Splash, he had already activated his defensive magic, Disarming Loop, without saying a word. Lucien walked towards Jackson, looking at him wielding his dagger in vain. Without saying anything, Lucien grabbed Jackson's hand and slowly pushed the dagger into his neck. The gravity affected the blood, and it didn't squirt out from his neck too much. It was ideal because Lucien did not want any of Jackson's dirty blood on his clothes. Jackson's great anger and pain were choked in his throat. His eyes were wide open and his eyeballs almost burst out, while his arms and legs were twitching against the wall. Jackson's nails were scratching on the ground, but soon his resistance was no more. The other guy did not take Lucien much time as well. Standing beside the underground sewage river, Lucien saw the old man's body floating quietly downstream with his face soaking in the water. Lucien felt relieved, because he thought the old man would be the biggest threat among them. Who knew if the old man had some kind of evil power from his heretic belief? All this happened within just 20 seconds. The darkness was still covering the area some distance away. The two injured beggars were still writhing in agony on the ground. Some beggars and gangsters were still floating on the water, but they were too scared to find the broken steel net to escape. Lucien did not want to kill them all by himself, and he was also not able to. His power had a limit, so the easiest way was driving the rest of them into the Belem River and leaving them to the ghosts there. But there was one problem. Lucien also could not see anything in the dark area, so he had to stand there for now, waiting for the magic to expire. At the same time, he was adjusting his respiratory rhythm in order to recover his power. Casting the 4 spells was very tiring. Lucien's remaining power was only enough to use either darkness or freezing rays once. Suddenly the light returned within the spell area. The light startled Scar, and he couldn't help but close his eyes. The fear of death scared him to his knees. He trembled and prayed, "May God forgive me. May God forgive me." Slowly opening his eyes, Scar was shocked to find how young the wizard was. In the dim light, the wizard had fine features. Scar had lost his mind and surrendered. He could not tell whether the man standing in front of him was an evil wizard or a hateful ghost. It was a good chance to cast Eyes of Stars on Scar when he was suffering a mental breakdown. The apprentice magic could mesmerize the enemy or make the person fall into a trance state. The two effects were different. The former, mesmerization, required the caster to look into the other person's eyes for almost 10 minutes, while the latter, trancing, only needed some eye contact, which was more helpful in a fight. If Lucien could take control of Scar, he could use him to kill the rest of them. When Lucien was about to cast the spell, a sudden short scream pierced the silence and echoed in the whole space. Even Lucien felt very strange. As suddenly as the scream of agony started, it stopped. Lucien stopped his spelling and took a step behind his disarming loop. His freezing rays were ready to go. At this time, both Lucien and Scar saw the horrific scene. In the river, a strong and pale hand was holding tight at a gangster's neck, whose skull was half opened. A black tongue was licking the white brain inside with some effort. The owner of the tongue was a humanoid monster, whose body was so swollen that its skin appeared almost transparent. Parts of its skin were hanging, showing its rotten flesh beneath. Under the cover of the monster's seaweed-like long hair, there were facial muscles that could fall off at any time. The place where the eyeball should be was completely hollow, and there were two tiny white flames burning inside the two eye sockets. Another beggar's body, whose brain was completely gone already, was floating towards the river through the big hole on the steel net. The great master of Argent, the forever-lasting silence, may you bless your servants. A beggar sitting next to the wall started praying desperately. The monster had a frightening power that reeked of doom. Even Lucien was extremely nervous and terrified, although he was quite a distance away from the monster. Aquatic zombies? These were the monsters in the Balem River. They were zombies. Lucien suddenly recalled the witch's note, which described the features of the undead creature. Aquatic zombie, immune to mind magic, no morale. Immune to poison, sleep, paralysis, stun, disease effects, no fatigue, exhaustion, breath. Do not feel cold. Strong resistance towards ice and acid. Extremely afraid of fire and light magic. But what frightened Lucien was that the note did not mention anything about the flames in the zombie's eyes. Something was definitely, according to the witch's notes, an aquatic zombie was no stronger than a male adult. But unlike most of the undead, these zombies were way faster and swift, while they still carried the features belonging to the undead: strong resistance to physical damage and other immunities. Therefore, common people and even some night squires usually did not have any chance to survive when facing these zombies, unless they had a significant advantage in numbers. Since aquatic zombies were extremely afraid of fire and light magic, a torch could burn them down if it was used properly. However, this zombie just showed up from the water, which meant its strength and agility would be increased significantly. Fire magic was also not that powerful anymore because of the water. Only light magic could be helpful under this circumstance. Lucien was absolutely not prepared. Although he knew that he had to confront aquatic zombies someday, it definitely should not be today. The witch mentioned in the note that there was a kind of material called flame jelly, which could be used for alchemy. A piece of jelly could even burn in water for a while. However, at the moment Lucien mastered no useful light magic and also had no such jelly. Even worse was that somehow he felt the zombie he was facing was way stronger than the common ones described by the witch. Regarding light magic, sorcerers could never compete with pastors. Aside from light rays in the first circle and on, all light-related spells of apprentice level were not for attack purpose. Nevertheless, among element magic, fire magic ranked top mainly because it was hard to be brought under control. The only fire magic in apprentice magic list was Marius's small fire, which could only be used to kindle firewood when an apprentice forgot his or her flints in the wild. Escape was the first idea in Lucien's mind. At the same time, the mutant zombie had finished the gangster's brain and swiftly jumped on one of the beggars. Then Lucien heard a crisp crack in the beggar's neck. Pressing its fingernails deeply into the skull, the zombie opened the beggar's head very easily, like opening a walnut. Its speed and strength made Lucien stop. After seeing that, he understood that escape simply meant death. There was no other way to survive other than fight back, and for that he needed to calm down. Lucien's brain quickly started analyzing. The zombie's afraid of light, but it's very early in the morning, and it is still dark outside. The zombie won't give me enough time to light anything with my flints. Marius's small fire. No, I don't know how to cast the spell yet. Lucien was standing there, watching the zombie finishing the brain and then jumping onto Scar. His mind was being occupied by different thoughts and plans, but each of them was denied by him calmly. The ability to stay calm was the most important character of an outstanding sorcerer. Mutant zombies could impose a magical effect called Dread Aura on their targets to freeze them with fear. But Scar's fear of the zombie was so great that he managed to move his legs and started running for his life. However, only after few steps, the zombie swiftly overtook him and grabbed his feet. Scar squeaked out shrill cries desperately. Disarming Loop, Eyes of Stars, Mage Hand, Extinguishment, Acid Splash, Freezing Ray, that's all I know. Among them, Eyes of Stars and Extinguishment are of no use here. Disarming Loop is useful, but it's far from enough to stop the monster. Lucien was still standing there, his eyes staring at the monster. The zombie raised Scar with its 2 claws and directly tore him in half. Lucien could hear that Scar's heart, liver, and guts fell onto the ground with profuse bleeding. Scar's thrilling scream was still echoing in the pipes. Mage Hand, also not powerful enough. Acid Splash. Wait. Sulfur is required to cast Acid Splash, which is also a component of gunpowder. And during the casting process, the sulfur is lit. Lucien's brain was striving for survival. He would not let his brain become another feast for the monster. The zombie opened Scar's head, in which the white brain tissue was still slightly shaking like a bowl of jelly. Lucien could feel the effects of its dread aura. His heart was racing, and he felt breathless. He knew he couldn't lose his mind. Thus, he started analyzing the magic structure of Acid Splash, while his right hand reached into his pocket and grabbed a handful of sulfur. I gotta stop the magic reaction halfway when the sulfur is lit. The notes mentioned that it would backfire. The consequence going from exhausting spiritual power to severe damage in soul. Or even worse, analyzing the structure of the magic, Lucien tried to break it down into several parts to skip the acid reaction part during the casting process and only keep the fire from the sulfur. The process of deconstruction and reconstruction needed to be repeated several times. Even if Acid Splash was only a very simple apprentice-level spell, it was still very challenging for Lucien. Honestly, he was not sure if he wouldn't kill himself by doing this. But he had no other choice. The zombie devoured the brain and threw Scar's body away. Slowly, it turned to Lucien and suddenly started running towards its last target. In Lucien's eyes, all of these was like a slow motion. He could smell the stink of death and feel the overwhelming horror. No one could tell Lucien's fear from his face. Lucien didn't move at all. He was just standing there with the sulfur slowly falling through his fingers. The zombie was even faster than Lucien thought. In a second, the horrible creature was only a meter away from him. NOV-LB //JNN. In the meantime, Lucien started casting the spell and then forced himself to stop before it was completely finished. As if he was hammered in the head, dizziness seized him and his nose started to bleed, but instantly a trail of fire showed up in front of Lucien. The claw of the zombie was just a few inches away from Lucien's head. Lucien's power was completely exhausted, and he could not sustain the fire and let it grow anymore. In the last moment, he released the fire and fell onto the ground. He had tried his best. The zombie's claw got his clothes and left a long tear on them. Suddenly, a fire wall exploded between Lucien and the zombie. He raised his injured hands instinctively to protect his head, and then rolled away from the blue fire. The firewall did not last long. However, after a whoosh, the zombie was covered in flames like a human-shaped torch. Swinging its claws, the zombie stopped attacking Lucien and started stumbling towards the water, but the monster became much slower now. Of course, Lucien wouldn't let it go back into the river. Grabbing the dagger, he stood up and caught up with the zombie. Lucien fiercely kicked the zombie down and stabbed the dagger into the holes where the 2 white flames were flickering. Lucien felt the burning pain caused by the heat. Twice. Lucien was too afraid to stop himself from stabbing the monster, as if the zombie would seize the chance and tear him in half if he lost the momentum for even a second. Even though the zombie was still crawling towards the river with flame on its back. But few meters away from the river, the white flames in its eyes were finally extinguished and its bones collapsed. Gasping with great effort, Lucien took out the zombie's brain with his dagger. He still remembered that he needed it. After its brain had been taken away, soon the zombie turned completely into ashes, in which something small was shining there. Grabbing his dagger, Lucien cautiously approached the pile of ash. The shiny item was actually a carved silver ring, inlaid with a small blue gem on top. It belonged to the zombie. Lucien was surprised. He picked the ring up and started scrutinizing it carefully. There was a line of letters on its surface, which was written in the common tongue. Human nature can be colder than snow. The ring was just plain looking, but when Lucien rubbed it gently, he felt a mysterious and amazing power coming from the gem. After a few minutes, when Lucien's power started slowly recovering from the magic backfire, he carefully examined the ring again using his spiritual power. Lucien's injured soul was slightly shocked as soon as his spirit entered into the ring. He felt inside the gem what seemed to be the power of Blizzard, but its structure was way more complicated than that of the apprentice-level magic. It's a magic ring. Maybe that's why the zombie seemed much stronger than the others. Lucien was excited. It seems that the ring's even superior to Benjamin's truth badge. I wonder which power level the ring belongs to. With his remaining spiritual power, Lucien couldn't even understand the magic structure in the ring, not to mention how to leave his own spiritual imprint on the structure in order to use the power. A sorcerer with the first circle spell, called Identify, could directly understand the magic properties of all level 1 magic items, without having to analyze their inner structures. One's ability in using Identify would grow along with their accumulated knowledge, and thus the person could progress and start using the items of higher level. Sometimes there was extra information in some of them, including their makers, for what purposes they were made, and so on. According to the witch's notes, all of the magic items could be divided into different standards: apprentice level, level 1 to 9, and legend level. The evaluation criteria was based on the power of the magic item. If the power was equal to a first circle magic or to the ability of a level 1 knight, it was, correspondingly, a level 1 magic item. Nevertheless, there were 4 ranks within each level: low, medium, high, and perfect. Taking a ring enchanted with the third circle spell Lightning, for example. If the ring could be used once a day, it was a low-rank level 3 magic ring. If it could be used 3 times a day, it would instead be considered a medium-rank level 3 one. If the ring had some extra benefits like increasing the magic resistance of the user, it would be a high-rank level 3 item. If a magic item had some kind of permanent augmentation effect, it would be a level higher than the other common ones. For example, Mind Blank was an 8-circle spell, and a magic item with the immunity towards this Ring 8 magic would be recognized as a precious level 9 magic artifact. Furthermore, the grading was also applied to magic weapons and armors. Lucien did not know the ring very well, so he dared not wear it casually in case there was any curse on it. After putting the ring in his pocket, he was in a pretty good mood. However, when he noticed all the bodies and blood around him, he knew that he had more work to do. Most importantly, he needed to learn how to preserve the aquatic zombie's brain tissue. Lucien did not know how to use the apprentice spell called Organ Preservation yet, but the zombie's brain tissue should be able to last from 3 to 5 days, which should be enough time for Lucien to master the spell. According to the notes, Organ Preservation was a spell that could actually be used for keeping many other things fresh besides organs. 24 hours duration each time. No magic reagent required. After opening the zombie's skull with the dagger, Lucien saw its black brain, which looked like countless disgusting worms entangling each other. Carefully, Lucien put the brain into a bag together with his ice stones. Knowing lots of money would be needed for learning magic in the future, Lucien plundered all the money from the bodies, including the 2 hollow-headed ones in the river. He got 33 nars and 52 fells in total. Looking at his bulging money bag, a smile appeared on Lucien's face. However, when Lucien was collecting the money, he noticed he couldn't see things clearly, and his head was buzzing sometimes. Finally, he realized that these were the sequelae from his spirit damage. There was no magic potion mentioned in the notes that could be used for this kind of injury. Therefore, the recovery might take a while. Then Lucien started doing the labor. Holding his breath, he wrapped up the guts scattered on the ground and threw them away into the river, along with the bodies. Gradually, he started getting used to the scene and even took a closer look at Scar's kidney. Lucien believed that soon all of them would become fish food in the Balem River. After rinsing away the blood on the ground, it was about time he left this place. It seems like the heresy has nothing to do with the aquatic zombie. Lucien thought to himself while he was walking. Then what about the red-eyed rats? Lucien decided that tomorrow morning he would go to Lord Ven's manor to find John before going to the Musicians' Association. He had to talk to John about the heresy, but, of course, without telling him what actually happened down here. NOVLB //JNN. Several pastors in training would come down to the sewers once every 3 days to clean up the trash in the river using spells. But the person stepping out of a shadow after Lucian left was definitely not a new pastor. The Lord of Argent, the forever lasting silence. The person giggled in a mix of disgust and amusement, continuously talking to himself. A different name, a different identity? Interesting. That person must have been bewitched by him. I can't wait to see his shadow coming upon the land. A battle between him and the Cardinal of Alto will be very interesting. Probably there is some kind of legacy left by the previous ancient magic empire that he could utilize. But the church would interrupt his plan, I bet. The person looked around. A cunning smile appeared upon his face. The pretty smart young guy just created the new apprentice magic, sulfuric firewall, by himself. Impressive. He could be very useful to me. Then his figure split into countless small shadow pieces, and he suddenly disappeared. Half an hour later, another figure appeared in the pipes, close to the broken iron net. It was a decently dressed man in his 30s. Black shirt, black suit, black shoes, almost everything black. His mustache was carefully trimmed, and his hair was a pompadour style. Graceful as the man might look, he had a dark aura of ferocity and brutality, and he was not a nobleman. He was Rosen Aaron. All his men knew that Rosen Aaron was a knight who had already awakened the blessing in his blood. When he was about to become a grand knight, unfortunately, his power went awry and turned out to be vicious and dark. The power not only destroyed his noble title, but also caused Aaron's endless hiding from the church. Aaron hated the god for treating him so cruelly, losing all of his possessions. For a long time, he lived like a rat, hiding all the time. While he was trying to at least dress like a nobleman, bitter hatred was still burning his guts day and night. The grading of knight and pastor was similar to the different levels of sorcerer. The ability to use the third circle spell fly, the sixth circle spell magic trigger, or many other ninth circle spells symbolized different levels of sorcerer. When a sorcerer or sorceress could start using one of these spells, it meant he or she had made a new breakthrough. Their spiritual power would grow by a large extent, and their souls would transform into a higher level form. Even their lives would be extended. In the ancient magic empire, people regarded the first and second circle sorcerers as junior rank mages, while third to fifth circle were middle rank mages, and sixth to eighth circle senior rank mages. Above them, a ninth circle sorcerer or sorceress would be respected as an archmage. Similarly, the levels 3, 6, and 9 were the key promoting points for a knight. If a person successfully awakened the blessing in their blood, they would first become a level 1 or level 2 knight. From level 3 to 5, they would be regarded as a grand knight. Then 6 to 8, a radiant knight. In level 9, the title was gold knight. And after that was the highest level of all, a legendary knight. For pastors, it went from junior rank to middle rank pastor. Then a middle rank pastor could be promoted to bishop. For the senior rank pastors, most of them would become cardinals. There was no special title for a level 9 pastor, but if one could successfully join the conclave, he or she would be respected as a grand cardinal. There were more than 400 registered official knights in the Duchy of Orveret. Among them, there were only around 50 grand knights and less than 10 radiant knights. Most of them were members of the Violet Knights, garrisoning different key fortresses. Back then, Aaron, who was a level 2 knight, was very close to becoming a grand knight, and thus ranking among the top 50 knights in the duchy. Now, he has been working for a big man for a long time, doing all the evil and bloody things for him to maintain his fake honor. Jackson and his men did not come back to the hideout in time. Aaron felt something went wrong, so he came down here himself. Sulfur, blood, and something else. Sniffing the air, Aaron's eyebrows frowned together. With the blessing power, Aaron was more sensitive to environment in general than common people. Aaron could tell that someone had cleaned this place up before, but there were still slight traces of blood, brain tissue, acid, and sulfur on the ground, showing that a fierce struggle just happened here. Acid, sulfur. Aaron was thinking out loud. Acid splash? It was a typical apprentice spell. An apprentice sorcerer did all this. Aaron could not believe his guess, but the reasoning did make sense. The person who did this had left quite a while before he arrived. It was too late for Aaron to track the responsible. Aaron was also concerned that what they were doing would be reported to the church or nobles. It was still possible to track him if he turned to the priests of Silverhorn for help, but Aaron would not. He knew their magic could not guarantee finding the person, and more importantly, if the person had already reported what they did to the church, what he should do immediately was escape. Then Aaron quickly turned around and disappeared in the darkness. Only his footsteps were still echoing there in the sewers. N/O/vel/b/in.c//om. Lying in the bed, Lucien was too nervous to fall asleep. Any little noise could scare Lucien out of the bed. Since there was no chance for him to have a good rest for now, he decided to take a look at the ring again. Doing research could calm Lucien down, and also if his enemies did find him, the ring might help. Inside the ring, there was a solid geometric model, of which the structure was not very complicated. With his high school mathematics and physics knowledge, it only took Lucien an hour to finish the analysis. But when Lucien was trying to imprint his spiritual mark on the magic structure, he almost failed during the process. His soul was damaged and Lucien felt his power totally unstable. With great effort, the magic structure was finally imprinted with Lucien's mark. The information of the ring came to his mind. The original owner of the ring, Ice Revenger, was a sorcerer apprentice who was betrayed by his best friend. In order to take his revenge, the apprentice turned to a great alchemist for help and spent all his money on that. The ring felt ice cold, so he could bear the bitterness of being betrayed in his mind. A second circle spell, Palmera's Frost Blades, was sealed in the ring. The spell could torture people with bitter cold and pain. The ring could help promoting the spiritual power of its owner to match a level 1 knight's strength. Furthermore, its owner could also use Palmera's Frost Blades once a day. Therefore, it was a middle-rank level 2 magic item. Lucien was not going to wear the ring for now, since it would definitely draw some attention and bring him unnecessary trouble, but he decided to carry the ring in his pocket just in case. Lucien woke up early at dawn with a bad headache. He felt dizzy and also had a fever. His physical weakness was caused by his internal injury from the magic backfire. There was no time for breakfast. Lucien wanted to report the heretics to Lord Ven as soon as possible. After changing to new linen clothes, he pushed the door open and headed towards Lord Ven's manor. The cool air outside was refreshing. He took a deep breath and felt his headache lessened. After 40 minutes walking, Lucien finally saw the magnificent manor. Lord Ven was a level 2 knight who used to pledge his allegiance to the Violet Knights. The Grand Duke of Orveret and him became good friends when the Grand Duke was still the Violet Count and the commander of the Violet Knights. When Lord Ven became older, he left the fortress in the Dark Mountain Range and started having a more peaceful lifestyle here. But from time to time, he was summoned to the palace to be the Grand Duke's military consultant. The manor was surrounded by a high wall and several watchtowers, demonstrating the owner's military background. Outside of the manor, a number of farmers had already started working. 2 young men in their gray knight squire uniforms were patrolling, followed by some guards. "Who are you? What are you doing here?" Noticing Lucien was walking towards them, a dark blonde knight asked sternly. Facing the knight squire, Lucien replied politely, "I'm a friend of John's. I'm looking for John to tell him something important." The dark blonde man, Ian, made a snort in contempt. "Why should I trust you? Just because you claim to be John's friend? John and other knight squires are in training. I can't let you in unless you have proof of your identity." Quite obviously, Ian did not get along well with John. Lord Ven always had John in high esteem, which made Ian feel more than jealous. In his eyes, John was just a stupid pauper who somehow got a chance to become a knight squire and was always using the knight rules to please Lord Ven, while he was definitely better educated and more talented. NOVLB //JNN. Another knight squire, Durago, felt the same way. Thus he just stood there, watching while Ian gave the newcomer a hard time. Ian thought that a poor youngster like the one who was standing in front of him would be frightened by the posture of a knight squire. Were it the case, the youngster might just give up or start begging them on his knees. After going through so many difficulties and challenges, Lucien understood clearly what he was facing. In his eyes, It was ridiculous to see the two squires trying to pick on him and nobody. Lucian answered seriously, John's friend is in great danger. If John can't make it back in time to avoid it, both of you will be responsible for the consequences. I'm pretty sure that Lord Ven would definitely not be happy with what you guys are doing here. He knew that Lord Ven was a nobleman who strictly stick to knight rules all the way in his life. If Lord Ven knew his men violated the rules, he would punish them severely and drive them away from his land with no hesitation. How dare you threaten me, you little bastard? Stepping forward, Ian was so furious that he almost pulled out his knight's sword. Lucian could feel the pressure coming from the high-level knight squire. Even the guards standing behind him felt frightened. What was out of their expectation was that Lucian was still the same, calm and serious. He asked sternly, "Are you going to kill me, an innocent and unarmed boy, right now?" It seemed like he was not affected by Ian's posture at all. His willpower was stronger than the threat. "Did you hear what I said?" Now it was Lucian's turn to take a step forward. "Do you still want to be a knight?" Ian's anger was burning his guts, but he knew if he really killed this bastard, his future title, rank, land, and manor would all be gone. He was not stupid. Durego tried to make the situation easier for Ian. After giving Lucian a distasteful glance, Durego hauled Ian back. "Don't waste our time on this. Don't let me see you again," said Ian viciously. Then he turned directly toward the manor. Durego's face looked grim. He just stood there, waiting for Ian. It didn't bother Lucian at all. As soon as he realized Ian and Durego were trying to cause him trouble, Lucian reached his hand into the pocket carrying the ring. The power of the ring helped increase his willpower to a higher level that could compete with a level 1 knight. Thus, of course, the pressure from Ian, a knight squire, could not affect him. Less than 5 minutes later, Lucian saw John running out from the gate in a hurry, followed by Ian, who was walking slowly behind him. John was very surprised when he recognized that it was Lucian. "You're here, Lucian? I thought you were the one who was in danger. Follow me. I'll explain it to you." Lucian stopped when he was sure that Ian and Durego couldn't hear their conversation. Then he turned to John and started telling his well-prepared story. "I met a weird old beggar a few days ago." Lucian put a worried look on his face. At first, he was just complaining about the nobles and knights, but later, yesterday, when no one was around, he started accusing God. And I realized he was a believer of the devil, who was doing his vicious missionary work in Alto. I was about to report to the church, but I saw he was secretly meeting Jackson. I'm afraid that the gangsters are involved with the heretic, and they may seize the chance and take revenge on us, or what's worse, on your parents. If you can report to Lord Ven directly about what's going on here, I believe the nobles and the church would pay more attention to it." Lucian looked into John's eyes. "These damn scum? Now they're involved with the devil. Yes, you're right. I should report it to Lord Ven immediately." John took Lucian's words directly without any doubt. "And John, I'm afraid the situation is even more severe than you thought. I counted. There are just about 10 beggars now in Alto. Many of them disappeared." Lucian continued warning him, but he could not tell John what happened in the sewers. Frowning his eyebrows, John could guess what happened to these poor, homeless guys. "Blood sacrifice," he murmured. Lucian nodded seriously. "Yes, that's what I'm guessing. But John, remember, don't tell Lord Ven that I was the one who found this out. I'm afraid some heretics would seek revenge on me. I have no power to protect myself, but you'll be awarded for reporting this," said John. Clapping on John's shoulder, Lucian's face softened a bit. "I'm more concerned with my life, John. Remember to ask Lord Ven not to divulge your information as well. You have a family to take care. They don't know how to fight as well." "I will. You're always this careful, Lucian." John nodded. There was nothing more important than his family. "But if there's any award, part of it is still yours," John promised. Lucian smiled. "Thanks, John." John stayed a bit longer with Lucian. Since Lucian told Ian and Durego that John's friend was in danger, it would be quite suspicious if John went back to the manor straight away. After John left, Lucian decided to wait for a few more minutes to make sure that everything was going as expected. A while later, Lucian was relieved when he saw a line of knights galloping across the field. Besides John, There were 6 squires and a young pastor led by a serious-looking elder knight. When Lucien went back to Alto, he felt some vibration under the ground from the sewers. Lord Vin's men were there already. To be prudent, Lucien decided he would not go back into the sewers for a while. Recently, he was focusing on analyzing magic. Sometime before the clock showed 8:30, Lucien finally arrived at his workplace. Elena was anxiously waiting for Lucien in the hall. Being late on the first day of work would definitely not make a good first impression on the director, Mr. Hank. Another receptionist, Kathy, smiled to her colleague and joked, "Elena, who are you waiting for?" "Your sweetheart." "Come on, Kathy. I'm waiting for a friend of mine. Today's his first day working for the association." When Elena was talking, Lucien came into the hall. "Thanks God you are here, Lucien." Elena walked out of the counter and toward Lucien. "Why do you look so tired? Are you sick?" Lucien knew he must look terrible. The headache caused by his soul injury was torturing him all the way. After rushing here, he felt quite dizzy. "Well, I think so, but I'm okay. Thank you for asking, Elena." Lucien smiled to Elena, who was wearing a long white dress today. "I think we're going to meet Mr. Hank now, aren't we?" asked Lucien. "Yes, we are." Elena started walking upstairs and was followed by Lucien. "No worries. Sunday's never a busy day, or say, the work is not busy in general." Mr. Hank was a middle-aged, serious man who was always wearing a decent suit. After asking some basic questions, Mr. Hank just nodded and asked Elena to lead Lucien directly to the library. The library was on the second floor. While they were heading toward it, Elena was trying to describe the other librarian to Lucien. "His name is Pierre Sandor. Both of you work the morning shift in the library. He's an okay guy. I don't think he'll give you a hard time, so no worries. But he's a bit, Elena paused for a few seconds. Weird. The guy called Pierre should also have some connections in the association, or he would have no chance working as a librarian here if he was just a nobody." Lucien just wanted to do his own work and avoid trouble as much as possible. The music library was huge and quiet, and thousands of precious music books, journals, and newspaper were collected here. There was only a black-haired young guy sitting behind the wood counter, reading the tablature carefully. In Lucien's eyes, the guy looked like a big fan of music. NOVLB //JNN. Pierre, Elena tried to draw his attention. "This is the new librarian, Lucien." Finally, Pierre raised his head from the book. His brown eyes looked a bit confused. "Morning, Elena. What day is it today?" "Sunday. Nice to meet you, Pierre. I'm Lucien Evans, the new librarian." Lucien introduced himself with a warm smile. Just realizing his new colleague was standing in front of him, Pierre walked out of the counter and greeted Lucien. "Nice to meet you, Lucien. I'm Pierre Sandor." When they were shaking hands, Pierre put on a sly smile. "Lucien, you'd better refrain yourself a bit." "What are you talking about, Pierre?" Elena was confused. "Just guys' conversation," answered Pierre casually. Shrugging her shoulders, Elena whispered to Lucien, "You see. I told you, and I gotta go now, Lucien. Make good use of the books here, and work hard." After Elena left, Pierre started showing Lucien around. While he was walking, he talked to Lucien casually. "I sometimes talk in a weird way. If you don't understand, don't let my words disturb you." "So you asking me to refrain myself was also a casual talk?" asked Lucien. "Nope, that was serious. Guys in our age can easily drain ourselves from too much. You know what I'm talking about." Lucien didn't know what to say. Now in Lucien's eyes, Pierre looked like a big fan of music and kind of nasty. After introducing the basic stuff that Lucien had to do as a librarian here, Pierre stretched himself a bit and said, "Only the members of the association can have access to this library, so it's never busy here. Just remember to be polite to the musicians. You can spend more time here, and I'm going to go back and enjoy the well-tempered clavier now." His eyes were glowing when he mentioned music. Sure, Lucien was more than willing to be left alone. With his spirit library, Lucien was always trying to store more books in it, like a squirrel collecting its favorite cones. Lucien quickly leafed through a book, and a copy of the book instantly appeared in his spirit library. Then Lucien directly turned to another one. "Hey, what are you doing there?" Pierre asked in a confused way. He hadn't gone far yet. I'm doing a random check here to see if there are any damaged ones. Then I can take note of them and report to the association." Lucien immediately made up an excuse. "You're as careful as a woman, Lucien," Pierre commented. In the following 4 hours, only 2 musicians visited the library. Lucien thus managed to collect more than 100 of the books there. His arms felt pretty sore from leafing through them. The books covered many aspects of the world, not just music. Lucien wanted to have a better understanding of the world as soon as possible. Lucien finished his work at about midday. When he was leaving the library, Pierre was still immersed in music with a bread in his hand. Later, Lucien went to Mr. Victor's place and continued his study. Life was pretty peaceful in the following couple of days. One evening, John came back. When no one was around, he started telling Lucien what happened on that day. Joel was still not at home when John and Lucien were talking, and Annie Elisa was busy preparing dinner. Their youngest son, Ivan, was still playing on the streets with his friends. "You can never imagine what we found down there," John said seriously. "There was a demon hall. NOVLB //JNN. What?" Lucien was more than surprised. "They built a hall down the sewers? Has Lord Vin questioned the heretics yet?" Shaking his head, John sighed with disappointment. "No, Lucien. We didn't find anyone there. All of them were already gone by the time we arrived." "It's impossible, John. I didn't tell anyone else about this except you." Lucien started feeling worried. What if the demon followers somehow found out it was him who exposed and denounced them? "Lord Vin told me that information about our actions might have been leaked by a knight. We don't know who did this yet, but if it's true, the knight should be of a relatively high level." Lucien thought about the possibility that the heretic power had infiltrated into the upper class. However, it was astonishing to imagine that the evil power had corroded some of the noble knights. "What about Aaron's gang?" Lucien asked. "The leaders escaped, including Rose and Aaron. The rest of the gangsters know nothing about the heresy. They can't lie in front of the divine power of the Inquisition." John's eyebrows frowned. "Even though they know nothing, all of them will be sentenced to death by the judges. Facing heresy, the Church never showed mercy." And Lucien believed that the way the Church treated sorcerers would not be any better than that. One of the books from the library that Lucien read recently was called Hunting Sorcerer, which was written in the year 392 of the Saint Calendar, or say 423 years ago. It was an instruction for sorcerer hunters and night watchers, telling them how to identify the sorcerers, how to track them, and even how to torture them. Lucien remembered some of the paragraphs, which sounded ridiculous and cruel to him. If a suspect lives in an unsociable or eccentric way, the chance of him or her being a sorcerer or a sorceress is high. However, even if a suspect is always sociable and passionate, the possibility still could not be ruled out, because he or she might just be pretending. If the person you suspect panics when he or she knows who you are, the person is a sorcerer. But if the person does not, don't lower our guard, because all the sorcerers are experienced liars. If your divine spells cannot help you make sure the identity of the suspect, inflicting sacred punishment on the suspect can be useful. If the person rolls eyes when facing the punishment, that means he or she is trying to communicate with demons to seek for power. If the person's eyes glaze fearlessly, that means he or she has got the protection from devil power, and thus you must torture the person in a more severe way. If the person dies, it is because the demons took his or her life in order to keep their secret safe. If you have tried them all but still cannot be sure, leave the suspect to our Almighty God. Burn the suspect. A sorcerer would burn down to ashes, while God would protect the person safe and sound in the fire if he or she is innocent. Lucien was grateful for still being alive. If Lucien had lived 400 years ago when the book was written, he would have been burned to death thousands of times. The Church had been dominating the whole continent for so many years. Thus they were now paying more attention to the heresy in the north, instead of going all out hunting scattered sorcerers and sorceresses. Then did you find anything in the demon hall? Lucien asked with curiosity. Bad memories made John's eyebrows frown even tighter. We knights squires didn't go in there. Knights and pastors led by Lord Vin, Lord Verity, and the Cardinal of Salvatore searched the hall. Lord Vin never told me what he saw there, but I saw his face when he walked out. He looked very serious. I was guarding outside of the gate. John's eyes looked down at the ground, and Lucien could tell the bad memory still disturbed him. When they opened the gate, I saw the ground was covered with blood. And I saw hearts. Living, throbbing hearts on the ground. They said that those were hearts extracted from people's chests when they were alive. Lucien, I've heard many stories, poems, and rumors saying how horrible and vicious the heresy is, but today I finally realized how hateful and inhuman it can be. John raised his head and looked at Lucien, speaking with great determination. I hate them, the heretics. I can never forget what I saw there. I want to grow stronger and eliminate the demons completely. Looking at his serious face, Lucien smiled. This is the justice you're looking for, isn't it, John? John nodded, but then shook his head. I still don't clearly know what kind of justice I'm looking for, Lucien. All I know is that I not only want to protect my families and friends, but I also want to protect more people and fight against the dark powers. I know there's a class among the knights called Demon Hunter. They walk in the darkness and are willing to die fighting against the devil power. Is that your dream now? Asked Lucien. I don't know, Lucien. I still can't awaken my blessing power. Not everyone can become a real knight, not to mention becoming a demon hunter. John replied, a bit depressed. Come on. Of course you can. Lucien gave John a friendly nudge. Look who am I talking to? The most promising knight squire appreciated by Lord Vin. Feeling the encouragement from his best friend, John grinned at Lucien. Talking about Lord Vin, Lucien asked, did he mention anything about your rewards? Yes, sure. John's face was lightened by this topic. Lord Vin promised to give me a good knight sword made of fine steel. Compared with what I'm using now, this one would be much sharper and even have some magic effects on it. Talking about the new sword, John even giggled a bit with sweet expectation. Lucien and John stopped their conversation when Joel came back. In the end, John reminded Lucien, Lord Vin told me that security will be tightened and there will be much more undercover investigations in Alto recently. You were questioned before because of the witch, so be careful recently. You're Mr. Victor's student now, and you never know if there's anyone who'd frame you for this out of jealousy. Thank you, John. I'll be careful, said Lucien gratefully. He knew that, as a knight squire, John was not allowed to leak this kind of information to someone else. Lucien knew he had to be really careful recently and stop practicing most of the spells that could cause a mess. However, Lucien also believed that after this massive search, when the knights and the nobles started letting down their vigilance, it would be even safer than before. Another Sunday morning, and Lucien was trying to organize everything on his day off. Although he was not practicing much casting during the past couple of days, his analysis work of the other several magic spells went on pretty well. His spiritual power was completely recovered and grew even stronger than ever with his meditation. For now, Lucien could cast up to 6 spells of the element school successively. In his spare time, Lucien also worked hard on his music studies. He spent lots of time with reading different books in his spirit library, but not only music books. From a variety of books, Lucien started to learn more about the continent. Those countries believing in the God of truth in the south, and heretic countries in the north, as well as the evil creatures living into the dark mountain range. The brain tissue of the mutant aquatic zombie could be preserved up to 3 years by exerting the magic once a day, which enabled Lucien to have enough time to collect the rest of the magic matters. Your progress impressed me again, Lucien. After testing Lucien's basic music knowledge learned within the several classes, Mr. Victor commended. Then we can move forward to actual practice and to learn how to integrate what you've learned from the books into it. When Lucien first helped with improving the harpsichord, Victor thought that Lucien might just happen to have an inspiration there. But now Victor felt that Lucien at least had some talent in music. Lucien, what musical instrument do you want to learn? Asked Victor gently. I'm relatively good at violin, harpsichord, pipe organ, and flute. But if you want to learn something else, I should also be able to help. Lucien never really put much thought into it. He was a bit hesitant. Lucien was a fan of piano back in the days, but he never had a chance to learn how to play it. But on second thought, one day Lucien would set out to find the headquarters of the Continental Congress of Magic, and of course, he could not carry a piano with him all the way. Probably he should choose something relatively portable like a violin. Lot, Felicia, and Herodotus were curious to see which one Lucian would choose. But Lucian was still hesitating. "It's okay, Lucian." Victor smiled. "If you have any concern, just tell me. Maybe I can help you." So Lucian asked cordially, "Mr. Victor, can I choose both the improved harpsichord and violins?" The rest of the three students were a bit pissed off. They felt Lucian was being really greedy because he could learn for free. "No problem," answered Victor, "but you gotta focus on one thing at a time. What about we start from learning harpsichord? And I can probably get some new ideas while I'm teaching." "Sure, thank you, Mr. Victor." Lucian was grateful. Standing up from the couch, Victor clapped his hands delightfully. "All right. Mr. Rhine and Mr. Chevelle have finished the improvement of the harpsichord a couple of days ago. Let's try the new harpsichord today. All of you can come." I even feel that I shouldn't call it a harpsichord anymore, since its tone, its range, and its volume are completely different now. For me, it's a revolution in string instruments. Seeing the joy on his face, Lucian could tell that Mr. Victor was very satisfied with the improvement. "Mr. Victor, as the initiator of the harpsichord improvement, you may like to give the new invention an official name." When they were walking upstairs, Lot talked to his teacher in a flattering way. "Yes, Rhine Chevelle, and I actually talked about the name before. However, none of us could find a proper name for it." Victor looked at Lucian with a mild smile on his face. "Lucian, what's your idea?" "My idea?" Lucian was a bit surprised. "Of course, you made no small contribution to this. We'd like to hear your suggestion," said Victor. "Well, Rhine appreciated its mechanical sophistication, so he wanted to name it Mechanical Harpsichord. I mean, Mr. Rhine is a talent in music, but definitely not good at naming a new musical instrument. Mechanical Harpsichord doesn't sound right to me at all. What's your idea then, sir?" Lucian asked. I prefer to have a new name. This new musical instrument combines both the features of harpsichord and clavichord, and it has a much wider range of tones compared with its predecessors. So I would suggest the name to be Superchord, including Lucian. None of the students present knew what to say toward this name. "Well, what about the name Pianoforte?" Lucian said with uncertainty. "Pianoforte? It's a pretty new name, but it sounds a bit weird." Victor rubbed his chin with his hand in thoughts. The sounds produced by the new instrument were an extension of what the harpsichord could do. Lucian was trying to make the weird name make sense. Lucian knew, in his world, the first piano made by the Italian harpsichord maker Cristofori was first called pianoforte. In Italian, pianoforte meant soft loud. Lucian wanted to keep the name because it would be sweet if he could play an instrument in this world which was almost the same as a piano on Earth. Pianoforte. Pianoforte. Victor found the name was pretty interesting. What about just piano? Lucian was very surprised that Victor would appreciate the name. "I like the name piano. Felicia agreed, which was even more beyond Lucian's expectation. It was the first time Felicia showed her commendation for any of Lucian's ideas. A faint blush appeared on her beautiful face. "I don't know why. I just somehow feel like it's the proper name." Mr. Victor nodded with a bit of confusion. "Yes, I feel the same way, Felicia. Piano. It feels like it should be called piano. Weird. Yeah, that's how I feel as well." Lucian was a bit nervous. He did not understand why both Mr. Victor and Felicia had a special feeling toward the name. Hurriedly, he changed the topic. "I can hear someone playing music in the practice room upstairs." "Yes, Mr. Rhine is here today. Didn't I mention it?" Victor answered with joy. Felicia's face was now as red as a ripe tomato. Rhine was sitting in front of the piano, his hair silver and his gesture charming. Without moving his shoulders and arms, his fingers were dancing on the piano keyboards, and a beautiful piece of music was flowing out of the musical instrument. They indulged themselves in the joys of the song. No one made a sound until Rhine finished playing. All the students and Mr. Victor started applauding for the amazing performance. "Mr. Rhine, as an excellent violinist, it's amazing that your skill in playing clavichord is also great." Felicia's eyes were glowing. "Your performance was as good as Miss Sylvia's." Standing from the bench, Rhine bowed to them elegantly with his right hand on his chest. He was trying to play the same song on both the clavichord and the piano to see the difference. He turned to Felicia and smiled. "I'm flattered, Felicia. but I can never compete with Ms. Sylvia. It was she who wrote this song after all. Ms. Sylvia was the best clavichord player in alto. Since clavichord was ideal for playing in a relatively small space, like in a living room or even bedroom, Mr. Sylvia was often invited by the noble ladies to play in their places. It was said that Ms. Sylvia was a close friend of Princess Natasha, and thus she enjoyed a high reputation in the association. When Ryan was playing, Lucien paid more attention on the movement of his fingers. At the same time, he searched in his spirit library and found some useful books to refer to. According to these books, the modification of a musical instrument was the main cause of the changes in fingerings, as well as the holistic style. The piano standing beside them had 88 keys and different pedals, which was already very close to a modern piano on Earth. Thus, Lucien believed the modern piano fingering should be the best way of playing it. On Earth, people used to play clavichord with 3 fingers of each hand. Then the famous pianist Bach started using his thumbs and little fingers. When piano gained its popularity, Chopin made a second revolution in fingerings by also playing the black keys with his thumb and little finger. When Lucien was reviewing the basic modern fingering books in his mind, Victor told Ryan about the new name of the instrument. It turned out that Ryan loved the name as well. "Come here, Lucien. Sit in front of the piano. I'm going to show you the basic fingerings," Victor said to him. Lucien trotted toward Mr. Victor with a bit excitement. However, as soon as he sat on the bench, Lucien felt something was not right. It was a bit too short for the piano. "Mr. Victor, can I have a taller bench?" asked Lucien. "Why? You're not much shorter than Mr. Ryan. The height should be fine." Victor was a bit surprised. Extending his arms, Lucien tried to show it to Mr. Victor. "But if I sit on a bench of this height, I could only use my fingers and wrists. If I want to use my lower and upper arm, as well as my shoulder, I need a taller bench, otherwise it would be too awkward." "That's because you're not supposed to use your arms and shoulders. That's too rude." Victor was pretty serious. "Forget about what you've seen in the pubs. You saw how Mr. Ryan played, didn't you? Did he ever use his arms and shoulders?" Victor's reaction was within Lucien's expectation. Modern piano fingering was quite hard to be accepted by many famous pianists back in the days. In their eyes, pianists using modern fingering like Franz Liszt were rude. The way of swinging arms and shoulders in their mind looked very barbaric, and it was like smashing the piano. "Yes, Lucien, those players in the pubs are not well educated. I know. You probably grew up in that environment, but now you're here. It's time for you to see what is noble music now." Seizing the chance, Herodotus scoffed at Lucien's words. "Mr. Victor, the piano is a new musical instrument," Lucien explained calmly. "I feel that how a musician plays the instrument should depend on the features of it. As an extension of harpsichord, piano is superior in both volume and range. With the strength of arm and shoulder, I feel its features could be presented in a better way." Ryan took a step forward and smiled at Victor. "I agree with Lucien. Remember the discussion about fingerings several years ago? Probably we can make a real difference again with it. N/O/vel/B//and .C//om. Victor thought for a while and finally said, "All right, maybe we can give it a shot. But Lucien, if it later is considered wrong, it would take you a long time to forget the wrong movements and start over again. Are you sure you want to do this?" Lucien nodded at Mr. Victor with a determined look. In the other students' eyes, Lucien was no more than an arrogant boy trying to impress Mr. Victor and Mr. Ryan in this stupid way. Mr. Victor passed a piece of notation to Lucien, which was written by himself for harpsichord beginners. The song did not require any expert skills, and thus, when it was played on a harpsichord, it was quite plain. However, after the improvement, the tone of the piano would definitely add some splendor to it. With his diligent practice of meditation, Lucien had an even better memory now. It only took him a while to roughly go through the music several times. Before him, Mr. Victor only saw noble students like Lot and Felicia being able to do this because they grew up under the nurture of music since they were born. "All right, Lucien, I know you still feel you're not prepared, but it's time for you to start playing. Don't be nervous, and just pay attention to the keys you should press down. Take it easy." Mr. Victor was quite looking forward to Lucien's first play. Putting his hands on the keyboard in a defined arch, Lucien pressed down the first key. It was not difficult for him to remember the song, but, as expected, playing it was a completely different story. Lucien felt his fingers were too clumsy to reach the right keys in time. Slow as he was, Lucien tried his best to focus on the keys to make sure they were the correct ones. Instead of a song, his first time playing sounded more like a bunch of separated notes climbing out of the piano slowly one by one, or like a dying man exhaling with great effort. However, no one there ever laughed at him, including the 3 noble students. Watching Lucien play reminded them of their own past struggle, which was even more terrible. It was a short piece of melody that should last around a minute, but it took Lucien more than 3 minutes to finish playing it. After he pressed down the last key, his forehead was oozing sweat. Lucien felt that even fighting with an aquatic zombie in the pipes could not be more exhausting. Mr. Victor was the first person who started applauding Lucien, followed by Ryan and the other students. "You did a good job, Lucien." Victor comforted him, smiling. "I know how clumsy a person would feel when he or she first started playing. But you are the only student I've seen that managed to press every key correctly." "It's impressive." Ryan nodded. "Yes, you are very smart, Lucien. I'm sure you will improve quickly with more practice. But the coordination of your hands was for sure not your strong point, and later you will also need to use your feet for the pedals. It'll be pretty challenging for you." "I agree," said Mr. Victor, "but being more coordinate is just a matter of time. If you're willing to work hard, you'll be a qualified musician within 10 years. 10 years? It seemed that even with the direction of a master musician, it still would take a long time for a person to achieve something in music. However, Lucien was still expecting that, by becoming a qualified musician as soon as possible, his living expenses as well as the cost for his magic experiments could be fully covered. "Is there any way to become a qualified musician faster?" Lucien asked. "Yes, sure, if you're a genius," Felicia interjected. "But you are not, Lucien. Working hard is the only way to become a qualified musician, and of course it takes time. Don't let Mr. Victor lose his face for having a student who couldn't even play the piano decently." In Felicia's eyes, Lucien's question fully showed his shallowness. Ryan responded in a more mild way. "I understand young people's eagerness, but like Felicia said, my current small achievement in playing violin took me a long time, and it's the same with other instruments." Then he paused a bit. "Well, actually hard practice is not the only way to become a qualified musician. If you could awaken the blessing in your blood, your ability of controlling your body would be increased by a large extent. With your smart little brain, you could probably become a piano musician within a few weeks. But how long it would take you to awaken the blessing?" Ryan shrugged his shoulders. "Maybe 10 years, maybe 20 years, or forever. What do you think?" "Becoming a genius sounds more practical, Lucien." Lot laughed. Victor turned to Lucien. "If you just want to master a relatively hard piece of melody, an intensive practice within a short period of time may be helpful, but this can never help you become a really good musician. Do not rush, but always work hard, Lucien." Victor tapped Lucien on his shoulders to encourage him. Lucien looked at Mr. Victor and nodded. After the class, Lucien started working on his monthly budget. He needed to give Annie Elisa 3 nars every month for the meals because he was now eating with their family more often. Also, more money would be spent on building a secret magic lab in the future, when Alto calmed down and became safer. Besides money, Lucien still had lots of concerns. Buying too many glasswares for magic experiments could be very suspicious to the church, and Lucien currently had no idea what to do with them. He also needed some black robes, so he could sew some rows of small pockets inside for carrying more different magic reagents in the future. Burying his head in his arms, Lucien thought to himself, "Maybe I'll become a tailor, sewing clothes for people rather than a sorcerer." The idea amused him a bit. Several days later, at night, Lucien was reviewing the last magic he analyzed, Hohmann's Oscillation, even though it was too risky for him to practice the spell at this moment. Besides, by changing the vibration frequency of his spiritual power, now Lucien could leave an imperceptible magic mark on a target, which made him very happy. As for music, like Ryan commented, after a certain stage, his good memory could not help much anymore. His poor coordination became his biggest problem, so Lucien was still practicing the same etude. All of a sudden, Lucien heard someone or something was swiftly approaching his shack. Lucien hid all his stuff under the bed in a hurry and stood there in a defensive posture. Knock, knock, knock. The window opened by itself. Lucien felt a familiar wave of magic power coming inside. He was very nervous but also kind of excited. Was it another sorcerer apprentice? Or even a real sorcerer? A tawny owl flew in through the window and landed on the table. Somehow Lucien felt it had an arrogant-looking face, and the owl started speaking in a harsh voice. "You should open the window for me, you little boy." Lucien was not really scared. In the notes, the witch mentioned some animals that could talk. Some of them were sorcerers or sorceresses transformed into different kind of animals, while some of them were summoned pets. However, Lucien was not sure which one the owl was yet. Strolling on the table, the arrogant owl looked at Lucien from top to bottom. Then it started talking again. "Don't be afraid, boy. As long as you answer my questions honestly, Lord Doro won't hurt you." Lucien nodded his head, feeling as long as all the required reagents were ready, an apprentice could start summoning his or her own pet. With different reagents, there were also different summoned animals. Some could be common animals like owls, cats, or ravens, while some could be very powerful magic creatures like a fairy dragon. Once they were summoned, mysterious connections would be built between the owners and them. Thus, an owner could gain some special abilities based on the features of his or her summoned pet, and vice versa. As long as the pet was strong enough to handle magic, it could also use some of its owner's basic spells. For example, if one could summon a cat as his or her companion, the summoner usually would then have good night vision, and there would be also a significant improvement in the person's agility. Meanwhile, the cat could help its owner to cast some of the apprentice spells like darkness and organ preservation, even some basic necromantic spells. However, as to how many spells a companion pet could master, and how many times it could cast the spells depended on its owner's level. That was to say, the power consumed by a spell would not come from the pet, but still from its owner. If the owner's remaining spiritual power was not enough, the pet would not be able to use magic. A summoned companion pet could also grow stronger to higher levels, but the special abilities its owner gained would not be further improved along the process. If the pet died, or somehow the connection was broken, the owner would lose the special abilities deriving from the pet, and even be injured. Lucien had never paid much attention to summoning spells before, because having a magic pet in the city under the nose of the church could easily bring him big trouble. A few seconds later, Lucien slowly answered the owl's question. "No, I didn't see any other sorcerer or sorceress." The owl flapped its wings in satisfaction. "Very well. You are indeed not lying. Lord Doro has been watching you for some time, and no one came or asked about her." Sneaky little bird. Lucien almost rolled his eyes. Then, the second question, what happened in the witch's secret chamber, and what did you find there? The owl's big round eyes blinked. "Well, I went down there with a few guards." Lucien told the owl exactly what had happened in the chamber, except, of course, the part about the magic books being copied to his spirit library. No one would believe that there was a whole library in his soul anyway. What a tragedy for the guard. He lost his arm. The owl sighed. "Good boy. Lord Doro's job is done now. Good night, little boy." Then it flew directly toward the open window and gradually disappeared in the darkness. Then Lucien finally realized that Doro was the owl's name. Without doubt, the owl had a master, and Lucien wanted to figure out who the person was. So when Lucien was talking, he left an almost undetectable mark on Doro, the owl, with his spiritual power. When he was sure that the owl had flown some distance away from his place, Lucien quickly put on his black robe and ran out of the door. It was very dark outside at midnight, and the streets were quiet. Lucien spread his power out and soon detected the owl. The owl did not fly very fast. Lucien was a bit hesitant whether he should follow the bird or not. Doro didn't look like a very strong summoned pet, so Lucien was guessing that its owner probably was also an apprentice. But what if there were other sorcerers at the place? A few seconds later, Lucien decided to take the risk. After all, sooner or later, he needed to find other apprentices or sorcerers and join them. Such a good opportunity like the one sitting in front of him, was definitely worth the risk. Furthermore, if Lucien found himself in a dangerous situation, he still had a level 2 magic ring to help him, the Ice Revenger. Lucien followed the target and ran on the streets. At the same time, he kept some distance between him and Doro to make sure he wouldn't be noticed. About 10 minutes later, Lucien saw the owl flying into a window on the second floor of a building covered by darkness. Carefully, he approached it and was a bit surprised when he found out it was actually the Copper Coronet. Lucien put his Ice Revenger on the finger and then carefully walked toward the back door of the pub. With some easy apprentice spells, he sneaked into the tavern and went upstairs. Luckily, no one was on the corridor at this time. Listening carefully with the help of his spiritual power, Lucien could hear a man talking in a low voice inside one of the rooms. Listening to his owl's report, Smile was sitting in a rocking chair with a glass of wine in his hand. Then he closed his eyes and lay back on the chair. Well, it seems that the guy doesn't know the witch as well. Oh no, I have no clue now, not at all. How can I find the man from the Continental Congress? Smile, as long as we keep collecting information, Doro was trying to comfort him. While he was feeling depressed, there was a knock on the front door. Doro jumped to the bed at once and buried himself under the blanket, while Smile bounced out of the rocking chair and asked nervously, "Who is it?" "I'm looking for Doro, the owl, and you, Mr. Smile," a man answered in a calm way. His voice sounded harsh and cold. "What?" Doro screamed, and its big round eyes opened even wider. Smile's spell was ready, but he dared not launch the attack rashly on a stranger who he knew nothing about. "I asked, who are you?" Smile repeated. N/O/vel/b//and.c//om. "I'm a sorcerer, and I know the witch. Like you, I'm also looking for the man from the Congress." The harsh voice paused a bit and continued. "Earlier I heard your owl asking a young boy about the witch, so I followed your pet and came here." "What?" "It was Lord Doro's mistake." "What a tragedy," yelled the owl. Smile relaxed a bit. At least he knew it was not the church, or they would have broken the door at once, without any explanation. "If you're a sorcerer, you don't need me to open the door for you." Smile did not lower his guard, though. If the man opened the door by himself, he could have a few more seconds to better cast defensive measures. Besides, he could tell from the spell if the guy was really a sorcerer or a pastor in disguise. The two powers were different. Then, the door opened. A freezing cold and threatening power came into the place before the sorcerer entered. Smile took a step back. He knew he was definitely overpowered. None of his apprentice spells would be helpful when facing the other sorcerer's power. Then he saw a mysterious man wearing a black robe, whose face was hidden in the shadow of a hood. Lucien, on the other hand, saw the apprentice's face well enough and realized that he actually met Smile before. When Lucien first visited Copper Coronet, Smile was the hook-nosed man sitting beside the pub counter.